Chapter 1138. Analyzing the Divine Patterns. Chapter 1138. Analyzing the Divine Patterns. Pung, pung, pung. The goddess furnace became more and more mangled as it was ferociously punched by Ling Han. Right now, it was so disfigured that it couldn't even be called a furnace anymore. Initially, Ling Han had still needed to use an origin power shield to protect his clothes. However, he retracted this shield after being absorbed into the furnace. So be it if his clothes were incinerated. His physique was already on par with level 5 godly metal anyway, so even elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would find it extremely difficult to injure him. He put all of his power behind his attacks, and at this moment, his fists could be seen as a pair of level 5 god tools. They were shrouded in divine patterns and brimming with destructive power. Ling Han aggressively destroyed a section of the furnace. However, this furnace had been forged from several layers of godly metal, and thus the furnace wasn't punctured even though he had destroyed a layer. Rather, the layer of godly metal behind it appeared before him. Ling Han saw a divine pattern on this layer of godly metal. This is the martial intent left by some fire element cultivator. I can use it for reference and learn from it. Ling Han was overjoyed, and he immediately stopped his attacks and started to analyze the divine pattern. This divine pattern wasn't complete, with only a small portion of it being visible. The rest of it was hidden behind the most internal layer of godly metal. Pong, 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 pong. He started to unleash his devastating attacks again. Only when the entire divine pattern was revealed did Ling Han stop his attacks. He continued to analyze the divine pattern. Just like that, he would launch ferocious attacks one moment, and then stop to analyze the divine patterns the next. The people outside didn't know this, so they found this situation to be extremely strange. What on earth is going on? He's incredibly ferocious at times, and smashes the furnace so relentlessly that it appears as if it's going to explode. However, he suddenly stops attacking and goes completely quiet at other times. Is he resting inside? Humph! Who can escape from the goddess furnace? Gan Shiyun said haughtily. If this were the real goddess furnace, even heavenly body tier elites could be forcefully refined. Everyone nodded in agreement. By the looks of it, Ling Han was already a spent force. It had already been a long time since they had heard him attacking the furnace. Sure enough, this goddess furnace was incredibly powerful. Hu Feiyun tilted her head upward and confidently said, "Humph, Ling Han Lin definitely won't be refined." In her mind, Ling Han was invincible. Right now was also no exception. What an absolute joke. He's already been trapped in the goddess furnace, so how can he escape? Fu Liangye said in scorn. Gan Shiyun smiled coldly and said, "You said that the fool isn't dead yet? Then tell him to give a shout." Pong! Another fist-shaped dent appeared on the goddess furnace at this moment, causing the entire furnace to shudder. She had just asked Hu Feiyun to have Ling Han give a shout, and he had responded the very next moment. The devastating power of his punch was more than enough to prove that he was still alive and well. Gan Shiyun's and Fu Liangye's expression darkened. This was utter humiliation. It was as if they had been slapped across the face. Hu Feiyun couldn't help but laugh in a silvery voice. It was just as she had expected. How could Ling Han be restrained by this mere furnace? Meanwhile, Ling Han had already finished analyzing the first divine pattern in the goddess furnace. Thus, he started to attack the goddess furnace again. After destroying a nearby section of godly metal, he stopped his attacks and continued to analyze the divine patterns. He had the Black Tower and the Reincarnation Tree, so one day's comprehension was equivalent to 1 year's worth. Thus, the speed of his comprehension was incredible. The entirety of the second divine pattern was finally revealed after he destroyed another layer of godly metal. Ling Han memorized this divine pattern and then entered the Black Tower to comprehend it under the Reincarnation Tree. This way, he would be able to understand and master this divine pattern as quickly as possible. Another divine pattern of flame had already appeared on his mountains and rivers. It wasn't long before he exited the Black Tower. Pong, pong, pong. The third divine pattern was revealed after another burst of ferocious attacks. Ling Han started his comprehension again. The people outside were completely stumped. The person inside would attack for a while, and then suddenly stop. What on earth was he doing? Some thought that he was on the verge of being refined, yet he would continue to launch devastating attacks once in a while. Others thought that he could escape from the furnace, yet he would suddenly stop after attacking for a while. What the hell are you doing? The people outside were almost driven crazy. After a few hours, Ling Han had already destroyed all of the internal layers of the goddess furnace. He had also analyzed and grasped all of the divine patterns. However, he still hadn't had enough, and he wondered just how good it would be if he could analyze the real goddess furnace. It was a shame that the goddess furnace was a precious treasure of the Gon clan. That being the case, how could he possibly analyze and comprehend it? Generally speaking, God tools were all nurtured and formed by the martial intent of cultivators. They would be inscribed with one's comprehension of the great Tao, and such comprehensions would reveal themselves in the form of divine patterns. Thus, analyzing these divine patterns was equivalent to analyzing a cultivator's martial intent. Of course, not all divine patterns were worthy of being analyzed and mastered. However, it would only take a glance for one to determine whether a divine pattern was worth studying or not. After all, how could immortals not possess such judgment? In any case, Ling Han had already grasped all of the divine patterns, so there was no point in him staying in the goddess furnace for any longer. Ling Han sighed in disappointment. Why didn't this goddess furnace give him more divine patterns to comprehend? These divine patterns of flames were extremely helpful to him. Pong, 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 pong. He started to unleash his full power against the goddess furnace. He was like an enraged ape, and the goldy metal in the furnace was destroyed layer by layer. Although this goddess furnace was only a replica, it was still extremely sophisticated. It was forged from 9 layers of godly metal, with divine patterns inscribed into each layer. It was especially mighty, and it was basically indestructible, at least for cultivators at the Mountain River tier. However, Ling Han was an exception. One had to realize that his physique was on par with level 5 godly metal. Not only that, but his power could also surpass 7 stars, with his fists being almost as powerful as level 5 god tools. The goddess furnace was no match for Ling Han, and it was destroyed layer by layer. The onlookers had already become accustomed to this banging sound, as they had heard it every once in a while. However, they quickly realized that this time was different. Because the banging sound had gone on for far too long. Boom! A hand suddenly reached out from the goddess furnace. At the same time, a giant crack appeared on this furnace that had already been beaten beyond recognition. Pong! There was another deafening boom, and the crack grew even larger, revealing a youthful face. It was Ling Han. Gasp! Everyone drew a sharp breath. Judging by his relaxed expression, he hadn't been wounded a single bit. This was the goddess furnace. Yet, it had actually been brutally smashed open. Not only that, but the culprit was actually unscathed. Oh! Ling Han had initially wanted to climb out, but he suddenly faltered and said, "Hang on a second." He retrieved some clothes from the Black Tower and put them on. With that done, he swung his fists a few more times and blasted open a hole that was large enough for him to get through. He then casually stepped out. Gon Shiyun's face twitched in disbelief. That was the goddess furnace. Although it was a replica, it was still a precious treasure. She had only been bestowed with this treasure because she was the most prodigious clan member of her generation. However, this god tool that she took so much pride in had actually been destroyed before her very eyes. She was unable to accept this. Could it be that Ling Han was actually a humanoid god tool? "Compensate me for the goddess furnace," she screamed in a high-pitched voice. This precious treasure belonged to the clan, and she had only been bestowed with the right to use it. She didn't own it. "Compensate you for what? This is my spoils of battle." Ling Han stowed the remains of the goddess furnace into his Black Tower. Although it wasn't a god tool anymore, he couldn't waste the materials. He could use it to elevate the quality of his divine demon sword. Why you? Gan Shiyun was seething with rage. Not only was Ling Han not planning to compensate her for the goddess furnace, but he had even taken its remains for himself. He had gone too far. Chapter 1139, Becoming a Seed. Chapter 1139, Becoming a Seed. How dare you? Gan Shiyun shouted in rage. You're merely a lowly follower, yet you actually dare to steal my god tool? Are you trying to belittle the majestic heaven sect? Gan Shiyun wasn't wrong to say this. One of them was a disciple of the majestic heaven sect, while the other was only a follower of another seed. Not only that, but she was also a seed. Meanwhile, Ling Han couldn't even be considered a disciple of the majestic heaven sect. However, their cultivation levels were similar, yet she, a seed, couldn't even defeat another seed's follower. What face did she have to seek help from the sect? Ling Han smiled calmly and said, I understand. I won. So I took something as my spoils of battle. If you want it back, fine. Defeat me first. Defeat Ling Han. It was that easy. These words had always only been spoken by the seed-level prodigies. Now, however, a mere follower was saying it in an extremely arrogant manner. Hu Feiyun nodded and said, That's right. This is Ling Han Lin's spoils of battle. She was only adding more fuel to the fire. To say nothing of Gan Shiyun, even the other seeds wore looks of anger. They felt as if they, along with their dignity, were being walked over. They shot hostile glances at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Are you people going to shamelessly gang up on me at the slightest of disagreements? Haha, come. I'll take whatever comes my way. You can challenge me one-on-one, or you can all come at me as a group. It's all up to you. However, don't forget to submit to me if you lose. This infuriated the seeds even more. The fact that they had become seeds signified that they were invincible against those at the same cultivation level. Even if they had opponents, it would be their fellow seeds. However, they were being belittled by a mere follower now, so how could this not stoke their anger? These people had been arrogant and prideful even before they had entered the majestic heaven sect. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands and exclaimed, Han Lin, you're so amazing. This ninth king had been completely spoiled and pampered, and she was even a little ditzy on top of that. As a result, she couldn't read the mood at all. However, none of the seeds stepped forward to challenge Ling Han, even though they were all incandescent with rage. This was only natural. Gan Shiyun was definitely one of their stronger members, yet she had still been defeated even after summoning her replica goddess furnace. Would the results change if they challenged Ling Han? No way. Perhaps there was only a tiny number of mountain river tier cultivators who could suppress this freak, those king tier prodigies who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. If one couldn't reach the true pinnacle of the mountain river tier, they could only be referred to as prodigy, super genius, or supreme prodigy. They were quite some way off becoming a king tier prodigy. Hee. There was a drawn-out laugh, and a skinny man suddenly appeared among the onlookers. His aura was obscure, yet sensing just a tiny bit of it was enough to elicit a feeling of apprehension from the depths of one's soul. He was a supreme elite. The seeds hurriedly clasped their hands in greeting and said, My respects to Elder Hai Yun. Their expressions were especially respectful. This was because Elder Hai Yun was a heavenly body tier elite. Although they were all seed-level prodigies, being a seed meant that 90% of them could advance to the sun-moon tier, and most of them to the peak stage. Only less than 1/10 of them could eventually become heavenly body tier elites. This was already an optimistic estimate. Thus, how could they not suppress their pride and arrogance before such a supreme elite? Elder Hai Yun waved his hand. He turned his gaze to Ling Han, and the more he looked, the more surprised he became. Fortunately, his expression was hidden by the air of primal chaos that shrouded his face. Otherwise, the onlookers would definitely be stunned. A heavenly body tier elite was actually this surprised? Young man, are you interested in joining our sect? Elder Hai Yun smiled and said, I can guarantee that you'll become a seed. Everyone was stunned by his words, yet at the same time, they all felt that it was reasonable. Ling Han was able to defeat Gon Xiuna's seed with ease. Moreover, their cultivation levels were the same. This was enough to prove just how terrifying Ling Han's abilities were. If a prodigy like him couldn't enter the majestic heaven sect and become a seed, what kind of awkward situation would the other seeds be placed in? However, the majestic heaven sect had its own rules. It had never accepted a disciple outside of its recruitment periods that occurred once every 100 years. This was a custom that had been developed since long ago. However, Elder Hai Yun had actually broken this rule for Ling Han the first time that he saw him. This was naturally astounding. Ling Han pondered for a moment before answering, "I'm willing to join the majestic heaven sect." This had been his plan all along. Elder Hai Yun laughed heartily and appeared especially satisfied. He nodded and said, "The rest of you also choose some followers. Han Lin, come with me in a while. I have some things to say to you." "Understood," Ling Han said with a respectful nod. This was the respect that one had to show to heavenly body tier elites. Gon Shiyun's entire body shook in anger. What could she do now? Ling Han had also become a seed, so she couldn't even borrow the power of the sect. No, she definitely had to wash this humiliation away. If she wasn't powerful enough, she would seek help from others. She would seek help from those true freaks. Ling Han swept his gaze around the surroundings. He then strode toward the man and woman who had stepped out to help him just then. Now was different from just then, and his status had already changed completely. The crowds parted to let him through, and they all gazed at him with eagerness and fervor. They hoped that he would choose them as his followers. Many beauties also winked at him, their expressions as charming as could be. If they were chosen by Ling Han, they would definitely be willing to give even their bodies. Anyhow, being able to follow a seed-level prodigy was like a sparrow reaching a branch and being able to transform into a phoenix. It was a shame that Ling Han paid them no attention at all. He directly walked past them and arrived before the man and woman. Meanwhile, the ninth king also followed behind him. She was incredibly bored here, and she had finally come across an old friend. Thus, there was naturally a lot that she wanted to say. Ling Han smiled and asked, "This brother, are you interested in becoming my follower? Also, your junior sister can become her follower." He pointed toward Hu Feiyun. Hu Feiyun cocked her head and looked at the beauty in green, not appearing to have any objections. She really couldn't care less whom she took as a follower. Since Ling Han had given her a suggestion, she naturally wouldn't turn him down. The senior brother and junior sister duo was delighted by Ling Han's proposal. However, they were also feeling a little nervous and afraid. "I have to accept your gesture of goodwill for stepping out to help me. The most important thing to a cultivator is their disposition, and the actions of you two have won my admiration," Ling Han said. The pair exchanged a glance. Then, they both nodded. "I'm called Fanru," the senior brother said. "My junior sister is called Chan Xiao. Thank you for taking us as your followers, young Master Han," and he looked toward Hu Feiyun, whose name he still didn't know. "She's Hu Feiyun," Ling Han said with a smile. Chun Xiao immediately curtsied and said, "Greetings, Master." Hu Feiyun hurriedly pulled her up and said, "Just call me Fei Fei. I don't like others referring to me as Master." Chen Xiao nodded in understanding. She immediately developed a good impression of Hu Feiyun. "Okay, let's enter the sect," Ling Han said with a smile. He missed Shui Yinyu dearly, and he also wanted to reunite with his three brothers. He walked side by side with Hu Feiyun, while Fanru and Chun Xiao walked a few steps behind them. The other seeds also started to select followers, and the atmosphere instantly became boisterous as everyone clamored for a spot. Ling Han had Fanru and his junior sister follow Hu Feiyun first while he went over to visit Elder Hai Yun. He followed Elder Hai Yun to a residence on the main mountain peak. Clouds swirled around the peak, making it seem like heaven on earth. "This isn't your real appearance. Are you being hunted after offending too many people?" Elder Hai Yun cut straight to the point. Chapter 1140. I shall help you deal with it. Chapter 1140. I shall help you deal with it. Ling Han's heart clenched, but he also knew that it was truly difficult for disguise skills of this type to fool the eyes of heavenly body tier. He nodded, and replied, "My name is Ling Han. On my way to the Majestic Heaven sect, I was attacked, so I decided to simply change my appearance so the other side would believe that I have died. I would also be able to save myself from some trouble in this manner." Elder Hai Yun nodded in satisfaction. If Ling Han had been evasive, he would definitely have been secretly displeased. But now that Ling Han had spoken the truth without the slightest hesitation, his impression of Ling Han became even better. He was an elite of heavenly body tier and had the feeling of invincibility. Thus, he immediately said, "Who are your enemies? I can speak out for you and have them no longer target you." He was very confident to say such words. What matters could not be solved by a heavenly body tier in this world. At least, in this galaxy, there were definitely none. Ling Han was a bit sheepish and answered, "I have quite a number of enemies." "No matter." Elder Hai Yun waved his hand dismissively, not in the least concerned. Ling Han nodded and replied, "My enemies comprise Great Generals Sha and Zhao from Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire, as well as the Eternity Sky Emperor and the J-Drop Emperor. Additionally, the Dark Knight Hall are also having a covetous eye on me. I will be troubling you then, Senior." Pooh! Elder Hai Yun almost spat out a mouthful of blood. In his eyes, what kind of people could a mere cultivator of Mountain River tier manage to offend? At best, it would have to be Sun Moon tier, and only those in the low extreme or medium extreme. If not, how could Ling Han possibly be alive until now? He himself was an elite of the heavenly body tier. One word from him, and even those in the consummate level of Sun Moon tier would have to obey his command respectfully. Thus, this was naturally a small matter. But what kind of people had Ling Han offended? Great Generals Zhao and Sha, the Eternity Sky Emperor and J-Drop Emperor. They were all elites of the heavenly body tier. Even he was only in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, so his abilities were more or less even with those of Great Generals Zhao and Sha. And in front of the Eternity Sky Emperor and J-Drop Emperor, he wasn't even qualified to speak up. Among immortals, the gap of a minor level would mean a world of difference. What more when some had managed to become emperors, which one of them would not have battle prowess that allowed them to surpass a gap of 4 to 5 stars. "You," Elder Hai Yun looked at Ling Han. He was now a little hesitant. Would he be taking in a genius disciple, or in an extremely big bundle of trouble? However, with a turn of thought, he laughed loudly. For a mere cultivator of Mountain River tier to offend so many heavenly body tier elites, yet still manage to live so heartily was proof enough of his abilities. Who else in this world would be able to accomplish that? If this brat did not die, his future prospects would be boundless. "You have formed the 5th Mountain River, right?" Elder Hai Yun asked.
"Yes."
Ling Han did not hide that fact. Obviously, on the level of true elites, the 5th Mountain River, Sun Moon, and Heavenly Body was not a secret, and the so-called saying of 5-star geniuses only existing in legends was only a theory that spread in the circle of low-level cultivators. What elite had you seen that had said such words? With their difference in level, the world they came into contact with was naturally different as well. In truth, the Joint Peace Planet did not lack 5-star geniuses and 5-star geniuses in terms of power, the true 5-star geniuses. Empress Luan Xing herself was even a 9-star genius, but normal people would not be capable of coming into contact with such prodigies. Just look at Ling Han. After forming his 5th Majestic Heaven sect, he had entered into the Majestic Heaven sect, so what opportunity did normal people have to come into contact with him now? Furthermore, the belief that 5-star geniuses only existed in legends was already a universally accepted theory and an ironclad rule that was universally acknowledged. If you suddenly said that there even existed 7 or 8-star geniuses, how many would actually believe you? Human beings usually chose to believe what they were willing to believe. Not bad, not bad. At present, in the Mountain River tier, only 7 have formed the 5th Mountain River tier. Elder Hai Yun nodded as he gazed upon Ling Han even more kindly than before. Who would not like a genius? Yet Ling Han was slightly surprised. In this generation, there were actually as many as 7 that had formed the 5th Mountain River. This was merely a very small galaxy, and there were innumerable such galaxies in the entire immortal realm. Additionally, the overall level of the cultivation world here was not high, with only a single elite of the Eternal River tier. Any who managed to reach the Heavenly Body tier would be capable of building their own power base. If it was in a galaxy with a higher overall level of cultivation, then wouldn't there be even more young king tiers like this? That was definite. Ling Han nodded. However, the path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. The further you progressed, the harder it would become. Not only would it be difficult to reach a high cultivation tier, it would naturally be more difficult to cultivate to the pinnacle level on the higher cultivation tiers. A 10-star genius in Mountain River tier might perhaps decline to 9, 8, or 7 stars in future who could guarantee that he would be able to cultivate to the pinnacle on every cultivation level. Go on. Be more careful when you do things in future, and try to stay inside the sect, Elder Hai Yun commanded. After finding out what kind of people Ling Han had offended, he no longer dared to take complete charge of the matter. He might really not be capable of dealing with Ling Han's enemies. Ling Han saluted again, then turned and left. His lodgings were on the White Frost Peak. By this time, his rooms had already been prepared. It was a small palace, and was large enough to accommodate over 100 people, but presently, the only two staying here were Ling Han and Fan Ru. Not bad. The spiritual qi on the White Frost Peak is especially dense in the first place, and added with the fact that there is a formation in this palace to gather spiritual qi, it is really not bad to cultivate in this place. Ling Han nodded. He told Fan Ru to choose any room, while he himself would naturally be occupying the master rooms. However, if it was in terms of cultivation environment, how could this compare to the inside of the Black Tower? There was a reincarnation tree growing inside. Ling Han worked hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower. At first, he was slightly proud of himself, but when he heard that there were another 6 people in the Majestic Heaven sect that had formed the 5th Mountain River, he felt a strong pressure. In the Mountain River tier, he was still not invincible. If he was careless and relaxed, others might catch up to him, or the gap between him and others would become larger and larger. He took out true origin stones and built a small formation by his side. Abruptly, incredibly rich spiritual qi surged. It was practically impossible for it to disperse, just like a heavy fog. It twined around him and was absorbed by him. This was completely burning through his true origin stones, but the effects were apparent. The richness of this spiritual qi was at least 100-fold stronger than that of the spiritual qi outside. As Ling Han refined spiritual qi for his own use, he comprehended Tao underneath the reincarnation tree, allowing his thoughts to wander. I still have to combine cultivation with the use of alchemical pills, working on both at the same time. After the night ended, Ling Han stopped cultivation. He looked at Qin Yi and the others, and Yuan Chenghe, who was the most talented, had already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. If it was not because he wanted to make his cultivation level even sturdier, he could already attempt breaking through to the Mountain River tier by now. But there was no rush now. Though Yuan Chenghe was not a top-grade genius, there should be no problem for him to rush up to 14 stars in power. Then, his battle prowess would possibly reach 20 stars, and he could be called a genius in the immortal realm. Ling Han gave the 4 of them a few words of encouragement and then left the Black Tower. He decided to find Shui Yinyu, the Rain Emperor, and the others. He thought for a moment, and then decided to give more attention to his lover than his friends. He chose to find Shui Yinyu first. Ordinary disciples were naturally not staying on the White Frost Peak, but rather on the Black Water Peak. This mountain peak was much shorter than the White Frost Peak. On his way here, he could already sense that the spiritual qi in the environment here was much inferior. No wonder there were so many ordinary disciples that wanted to become the followers of Seeds. That was because they would be able to stay on the White Frost Peak, where the environment for cultivation was much better. What a coincidence. Ling Han was just about to find someone to ask where Shui Yinyu was staying when he just happened to see the beauty walk over, and there was a man in green robes following behind her. He looked quite handsome and seemed quite confident in himself, with a powerful vibe of arrogance. Chapter 1141, Fly. Chapter 1141, Fly. Because they were too far away, Ling Han could not hear what the two people were saying. He could only see that the green-robed young man kept bothering Shui Yinyu, and Shui Yinyu was coldly ignoring him. He had not seen her for 2 years, and Shui Yinyu was still as beautiful as she had been. However, she now had a coldness to her that would keep others away, like she was a beauty of ice. But she was the lovely type of woman, so this gave her a feeling of arrogance. She had the bearing of a queen indeed, with a bit of the type of appeal that the Empress Luan Xing possessed. Ling Han couldn't help but feel startled. He actually thought of Empress Luan Xing again. The charm of this Empress was really too powerful. He kept thinking of her now and then. Ling Han shook his head and chased out the voluptuous, enchanting figure of Empress Luan Xing from his mind. To think of another woman in front of Shui Yinyu was not something good. He strode over. His wife was being targeted by a detestably fly, so he naturally had to run over to become her knight in shining armor. Because they were walking towards each other, the distance between the two sides naturally became closer very soon. Junior sister Shui, why don't we go to the northern Goshawk Gorge later? I heard that a godly medicine has appeared there, and a great many people have already gone there to try their luck. The green-robed young man's voice floated over. By Hua, how many times have I told you? Don't follow me. Shui Yinyu uttered coldly. She raised her right hand, and frost formed over her hand. She was really angered now. The beauty was fierce, but it did not cause any feeling of disgust. Instead, it added some charm to her. The eyes of the green-robed young man lit up involuntarily. From the moment this beautiful flower had entered into the sect, he had already had his eye on her. And due to his abuse of authority, there was naturally no one that would compete with him. She was already his exclusive property to him. Unfortunately, this seductive beauty would not show a smile to him at all, causing him to be disappointed, but stoking the flames of his fighting spirit at the same time. He was determined to pluck this snowy lotus and have her smile warmly for him. Hi's heart throbbed, and he felt an urge to push this beauty down. Hey, your eyeballs are about to fall out. Ling Han walked forward and placed himself between the two of them without any explanation. Shui Yinyu immediately looked disgusted and hurried to take a few steps back. She detested Bai Hua, but this did not mean that she would be close with another man. Bai Hua, though, was angered. Who did you think you were, to actually dare to interfere in his business? He coughed and said, Junior brother looks quite unfamiliar. Which uncle are you under one? In the Majestic Heaven sect, ordinary disciples and key disciples would both be taken in by an elite of the Sun-Moon tier. However, they would address him as teacher and not master. Of course, if both sides were happy with the other, their relationship could progress further and develop into a master-disciple relationship. However, seated prodigies did not fall under this restriction. These people would get the personal guidance of heavenly body tier elites, and there was no fix they were under. Whichever heavenly body tier cultivator had free time would come and offer his guidance. Even Venerable Trinity himself would show up occasionally. Ling Han cracked a grin and said, What junior brother? Do you have any eyes? I am your senior brother. Bai Hua was enraged. He himself was a key disciple. If he was not, he would not be able to intimidate so many disciples and monopolize Shui Yinyu. Just looking at Ling Han, he did not have any sign marking him as a seed, and he recognized all the key disciples. Hence, there was only one possibility, and it was that Ling Han was just a normal disciple. In the Majestic Heaven sect, the hierarchy was still quite strict. No matter how high the cultivation level of an ordinary disciple was, as long as their major tier was the same, they would have to address key disciples and seeded disciples as senior brother or senior sister disciple. Of course, it was the same for key disciples. They would have to be humble in front of seed disciples. You were both in the mountain river tier, and you, an ordinary disciple, actually dared to call yourself a senior brother in front of a key disciple like himself? To put it more seriously, this was practically treason. How dare you? Bai Hua's expression darkened. There were passers-by in the proximity, and when they saw that there was a free show, they naturally stopped walking. They began to watch the show and even started a commentary, providing a detailed analysis of Bai Hua's identity and battle prowess. Ling Han asked, "What is it? Are you unconvinced?" "Convinced your head." Bai Hua made his move and delivered an attack at Ling Han. Hong! His fist punched out, his fist power forming a black wolf, which galloped towards Ling Han. It was formed from origin power, with his martial intent condensed within. Over 30 divine patterns could be seen flickering, which showed that even if he had not used his full effort in this blow, he had at least used 70 to 80%. After all, he was only a key disciple, so how many divine patterns could he form in any case? Ling Han pretended to be flustered and shot out more than 10 punches in a row to disperse this strike. Who is this? Though he dispersed this strike with great difficulty, to be able to disperse the strike of a key disciple is proof that his abilities are very strong. That's right. Bai Hua has already reached the peak stage of the consummate level, and this person could not possibly be at an advantage in terms of cultivation level, so all he has to rely on is his actual abilities. Do we have this kind of disciple on our Blackwater Peak? They all looked at one another and shook their heads. When Bai Hua saw that he had the upper hand with this strike, he had naturally lost his qualms. This was also what he had expected. In a situation where both sides were of the same cultivation level, how could an ordinary disciple be a match for a key disciple? Otherwise, what was the point of splitting them up into ordinary and key disciples? He continued to release powerful moves, each strike severe. Ling Han merely defended without attacking. He deliberately made it, so he cut a slightly sorry figure to avoid Shui Yinyu being able to infer anything. True enough, this seductive beauty did not recognize him at all. Although she kept watching from the sidelines, she did not reveal any obvious inclination which side she was leaning towards. In Shui Yinyu's eyes, he stepped up on his own, most probably because he, too, coveted her beauty. Abruptly, Ling Han had no interest to continue playing with Bai Hua, comparing playing with a man and playing with his wife. Which one was more interesting? Pong! His fist landed on Bai Hua's face, and the latter was suddenly sent flying. Fuck! Seeing this scene, the people in the surrounding area were all dumbstruck and gaped in shock. That was Bai Hua, a key disciple. This had to be a coincidence, everyone thought. Otherwise, how could someone with Bai Hua's abilities possibly have been struck with this blow? Even Bai Hua thought so. One punch from the other had suddenly penetrated his defenses, causing him to be unable to parry in time. He could only watch helplessly as he was hit. He leaped up from the ground and charged back over at Ling Han with a loud shout. Pong, 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 pong. Another several exchanges later, Bai Hua's lower abdomen was hit with a kick, and he was sent flying. Was it another coincidence? A muscle twitched in Bai Hua's cheek. He charged back again, but he was once more sent flying with a slap in just a few moves. This time, everyone could tell there was something off. How could there be so many coincidences that would cause Bai Hua to suffer time after time? What are you all watching? A newcomer rushed over and stuck his head out to look over curiously. However, when he saw the two sides that were fighting, he involuntarily choked with laughter. What is it? Someone beside him asked. Ha ha ha, Bai Hua is seeking his own humiliation here. That person laughed loudly. This senior brother is the super genius that was taken in as a seed as an exception yesterday. He managed to smash even senior sister disciple Gan Shiyun's goddess furnace with brute force. Pooh! Everyone spurted out. Chapter 1142, Jealousy. Chapter 1142, Jealousy. In the Majestic Heaven sect, every seed was definitely outstandingly famous. About 10,000 normal disciples would be taken in at the same time, and there would only be 1,000 key disciples. As for seeds, there would only be 100 at most, and that would still have to depend on the year. Sometimes, there were even only over a dozen. There had never been an incident wherein a heavenly body tier elite had been nurtured from normal and key disciples, but among the genius seeds, there were such examples, and furthermore, the ratio was even as high as 1 in every 10. Don't underestimate this ratio. It should be known that there would only be 1 in every 10 shattering void tier cultivators that could break through to the mountain river tier, and from the mountain river tier onwards, innumerable people would be stuck at every minor level. Upon further calculation, from the mountain river tier to the heavenly body tier, there was a total of 6 minor levels and 2 major tiers in between. Hence, in billions and billions of mountain river tier cultivators, perhaps only one would be capable of reaching the heavenly body tier. And going by that theory, about 10% of the seed disciples would be able to break through to the heavenly body tier. So how terrifying was this ratio? But this was very normal because the genius seeds were the most prodigious geniuses of each planet in the first place. Wasn't the high ratio of breaking through to the heavenly body tier a very normal thing, then? Ling Han was actually a seed. Everyone was shocked, but at the same time, they felt involuntarily amused. Previously, Bai Hua had said Ling Han had an exaggerated opinion of his own abilities and assumed the air of a senior brother, but in the end, Ling Han was the real senior brother disciple here. Bai Hua naturally heard these words loud and clear. His expression had already turned the color of maroon. This was really too humiliating. He glared at Ling Han, but dared not bear any thoughts of vengeance in his heart. To avenge himself facing a seed-level genius? He would have to be tired of living to do that. Covering his head and face, Bai Hua retreated to one side. He did not dare to fight with Ling Han anymore. A seed was a seed. Their battle prowess was too powerful. Ling Han looked at Shui Yinyu with a grin and asked, "Girl, I've saved you. So shouldn't you repay me with yourself?" Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what kind of expression they should put on. In broad daylight, you immediately started to take liberties with a woman at the slightest chance. Was that really appropriate? Even if you were a seed, you still couldn't be that arrogant. This was the majestic heaven sect, and if even the safety of the disciples in the sect could not be ensured, then what further purpose was there for its continued existence? "Thank you," Shui Yinyu replied coldly. Bai Hua did not leave, because he wanted to see Ling Han deflated in front of Shui Yinyu. True enough, this woman would not give face even to a seed. Elation involuntarily rose up in his heart. Seeing something that he could not obtain for himself, he naturally hoped that others would similarly not be capable of obtaining it. "What if I insist?" Ling Han stepped in front of Shui Yinyu, stretching his arms open, looking completely like a bully stealing away a bride for himself. "The sect has its rules," Shui Yinyu uttered icily. She did not believe Ling Han would do so, and the great elites in the sect wouldn't allow him to do as he liked. Ling Han snickered and said, "You are my wife. It is destined." He used his own voice to speak out these words. Abruptly, Shui Yinyu started. A sliver of pleasant surprise appeared on her beautiful face, but at the same time, there was also caution. After all, she could not confirm the identity of a person just based on voice alone. "Come, give me a hug," Ling Han said, and without asking for Shui Yinyu's agreement, directly wrapped her inside his arms. Fuck, he really succeeded. Everyone took a sharp breath. They felt that this seed-level genius was really too perverted to actually take liberties with a junior sister in front of all their eyes. Wasn't that seeking his own death? No matter how much of a genius you were, if you publicly trampled over the rules of the sect, who would be able to cover for you? With this embrace, Shui Yinyu naturally smelt a familiar scent immediately. It was him. She couldn't help but become excited, and involuntarily stretched out her arms to embrace Ling Han back. "Pooh!" Everyone spluttered. What was going on here? She was hooked so quickly? They did not know that Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were already a couple, and thought that Shui Yinyu had been moved with this embrace from Ling Han. Naturally, all of them felt regret. If they had known, they would have used force against this seductive beauty. Just see how easily she had been hooked. Bai Hua even spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt that a great injustice had been done to him. So it turned out that this woman liked a man that was forceful. Previously, he had pursued Shui Yinyu relentlessly without any success, and now, one forceful embrace from Ling Han, and Shui Yinyu had practically turned into a pool of water. How could he not be greatly angered by this? He only felt that he was the greatest idiot in the entire world. As they had been separated for 2 years, Shui Yinyu's passion burned like fire, and she took the initiative to kiss Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally not about to disappoint a beauty and kissed her heavily. Wah! A great commotion rose up in their surroundings, everyone cursing this adulteress. Naturally, they were the sour grapes. They were really too envious. A frightening aura swept over, causing an endless coldness to rise up from within the depths of their souls. Pa, 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 pa. Aside from Ling Han, everyone collapsed onto the ground at the same time, and Shui Yinyu, too, dropped bonelessly into Ling Han's arms, her delicate body trembling. Ling Han turned around in shock and saw that Hu Feiyun was presently looking at him and Shui Yinyu darkly. That endless, majestic presence was precisely exuded from her body. But at this moment, Ling Han thought that this was not that muddle-headed girl. It was Empress Luanxing. Precisely, in the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, Ling Han had already seen Empress Luanxing appear through Hu Feiyun in a very strange method, and now, she had appeared again. But there was no danger now, so why had you come out? Hold on, could it be because of jealousy? Ling Han felt that this was inconceivable, but aside from this reason, was there any second possibility? He laid Shui Yinyu down and hurriedly rushed towards Hu Feiyun. He grabbed her wrist in a single move and declared, "Come with me." Hu Feiyun's, no, the Empress Luanxing's eyes widened, and she seemed to be about to stretch out her imposing aura to send Ling Han flying. However, for some unknown reason, her heart softened, and she allowed him to take her away. The two of them soon arrived at White Frost Peak and entered into Ling Han's palace. "What exactly is wrong with you?" Ling Han asked. Empress Luanxing humphed and said, "What right do you have to ask me questions? Just now, you almost killed me. Could it be that I can't ask why?" Ling Han uttered angrily. Actually, Empress Luanxing didn't know herself why she had come out. It was completely a moment of impulse, which she involuntarily put into action. However, she was naturally not going to admit it. She declared, "I will kill whoever I want to, with or without a reason." She was really a tsundere. "You have to give me an honest explanation today. What relation is there between you and the Ninth King? Why can you appear in her body?" Ling Han said in a justified manner. "Do you think I will tell this secret to an irrelevant person?" Empress Luanxing smirked, though she felt like going crazy in her heart. He was merely in the mountain river tier, and could actually bargain in front of her? When was it that heavenly body tier had become so cheap? Ling Han stared at her for a moment, and then said, "All right, I can tell you some of my secrets, and you, too, must not hide anything from me." Empress Luanxing really wanted to ask him who did he think he was, and what basis did he have to make such a request of her, but every aspect of her time with Ling Han these 2 years rose up in her mind, especially the last bit, when she pounced on him. That scene caused her to blush heavily and her heart to throb madly, and involuntarily, her imposing manner in front of Ling Han softened slightly. "Don't resist my divine sense. I will bring you into my spatial god tool." Chapter 1143, Secret of the Nine Snake Tribe. Chapter 1143, Secret of the Nine Snake Tribe. Empress Luanxing naturally knew that Ling Han had a spatial god tool. If this hadn't been the case, she would have pushed him over and done him already. Her beautiful face involuntarily flushed red when she thought of this. She couldn't unleash all of her power in this current body, and thus she couldn't maintain the air of primal chaos around her face. Ling Han could clearly see her expression. This left him astonished. This Empress actually has a coy side to her. Has the sun risen from the west? Empress Luanxing became a little angry and said, "What are staring at me for?" Ling Han chuckled in reply. It was truly impossible for him to fear this Empress anymore. "Come." He swept the Empress up in his divine sense and brought her into the Black Tower. "How is this possible?" Empress Luanxing cried in surprise. The space inside this spatial god tool was far too vast. "There are heaps of impossible things waiting for you," Ling Han said smugly. Being able to astonish this Empress so much made him feel extremely accomplished. Empress Luanxing felt more and more astonished as she walked through the land. This was because there were all kinds of godly medicine growing here. They were all thriving and brimming with vitality, and their ages were also extremely high. She found this to be incredible. Ling Han had clearly only just arrived after opening the sky, so how could he have planted so many godly medicines? He didn't have enough time. Come. Ling Han grabbed the Empress' slender hand as he ran forward. Empress Luanxing instantly felt annoyed. Has he become addicted to grabbing my hand? She tugged her arm and tried to break free from his grip, yet she realized that her strength was surprisingly no match for Ling Han's. She couldn't help but feel shocked. Her cultivation level was clearly unchanged, so why couldn't she break free from a mere mountain river tier cultivator? How was this possible? You! She was so stunned that she could barely speak. Welcome to my world. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Here, I'm the one and only king. Humph. Small Tower appeared and humphed in displeasure. Ling Han grimaced. He sighed and said, Of course, there's also the tool spirit of this god tool. It never treats its owner seriously. Well, I'm so sorry about that, Small Tower said sarcastically. Empress Luanxing was transfixed with astonishment. What kind of god tool is this? How is it so impressive? It can even elevate Ling Han's power to a level far above mine. Also, why is this tool spirit so human? It doesn't seem like a tool spirit at all. Shouldn't they be emotionless and rigidly following some sort of regulation? They quickly arrived before the reincarnation tree. Notionless Saint was the first person to notice them. A puzzled expression appeared on his face as he saw Empress Luanxing, and he said, You remind me of the girl from before. However, you're clearly a different person. Strange. Kan Yi and the three others all greeted him respectfully and said, Young Master Han. Ling Han waved his hand and said, There's nothing for you guys to worry about. Keep cultivating and strive to reach the immortal level as soon as possible. Understood. The four people returned to their spots under the reincarnation tree and continued to cultivate. Meanwhile, Empress Luanxing stared at the reincarnation tree, and it was as if she recognized this divine tree. After a while, she shouted in surprise, This is the reincarnation tree. Ling Han nodded and said, You're truly knowledgeable. You even managed to recognize the reincarnation tree. Empress Luanxing pondered for a moment before saying, You bought a seed of a reincarnation tree once. Could this be it? Spot on. Ling Han raised his thumb as he praised the Empress. No praise would be too much praise for this kind of stunning beauty. Empress Luanxing naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to his deliberate praises. Instead, she mulled over how this was possible and said, It's only been a little over 2 years since you arrived in the immortal realm. Regardless of what you did, it would have been impossible for you to obtain so much godly medicine, to say nothing of this reincarnation tree. That being the case, there's only one possibility left. Her eyes lit up, and she said, You're able to accelerate the growth of godly medicine. Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled and said, How is it? Do you want to cultivate here? This is the reincarnation tree, so 1 day's worth of cultivation is equivalent to 1 year's worth. Empress Luanxing was extremely tempted by this offer. Accumulating origin power was an easy task to an elite like her. She could complete this process in a few thousand years. However, comprehending the Great Tao was different. This step could take millions or even tens of millions of years. The fact that this galaxy only had one eternal river tier elite was proof of just how difficult this step was. Empress Luanxing stared at Ling Han and asked, What conditions are there? This favor. No, this had already transcended the level of a mere favor. If she exposed the secret of Ling Han owning a reincarnation tree, he would definitely be hunted by all of the saints in the world. You don't want me to marry down, do you? Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, I already said just then, I'll tell you my biggest secret, and in exchange, you also need to tell me your secret. Empress Luanxing humphed upon hearing this. Do you think this is child's play? You'll tell me one secret, and then I'll tell you one? However, she had to admit that Ling Han trusted her a great deal. After all, he had even revealed the secret of his reincarnation tree to her. She couldn't help but feel slightly touched. Yes, only slightly, she stressed to herself. What do you want to know? The Empress asked haughtily. What's your relationship with this body? Ling Han asked. This was clearly Hu Feiyun's body, yet she had suddenly become Empress Luan Xing. Her power had risen along with this transformation, though it still hadn't reached the same height as Empress Luan Xing's original body. Even so, it had still reached the heavenly body tier. Haha, I know. Notionless Saint suddenly shouted. He wasn't content with being left aside. Senior knows? Ling Han said in surprise. Of course. Notionless Saint replied smugly. It's simple. She's from the Nine Snake tribe. Ling Han was completely baffled. How does her tribe have anything to do with this? Empress Luanxing decided to spill the beans upon hearing this. Otherwise, Notionless Saint would reveal her secret anyway. The Nine Snake tribe has a natural talent. That is, we're able to maintain 9 separate clones. Ling Han was dazed for a moment. Then, he suddenly came to his senses and said, This is one of your clones? Hang on a second. 9 kings. The 9 kings are your 9 separate clones? Correct. Empress Luanxing said with a nod. Ling Han finally understood why Notionless Saint had said that Empress Luanxing's power should have reached 9 stars, yet the power that she had displayed was far below this level. This was because the Empress had distributed her power among her 9 separate clones. No wonder the 9 kings held such lofty positions and received the unconditional support of the Empress. The reason for this was simple. The 9 kings were Empress Luanxing. Empress Luanxing saw that Ling Han was still a little puzzled, so she continued, I cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art and formed 9 separate bodies. When all of my clones reach the peak stage of the heavenly body tier and return to my primary body, I'll be able to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. Ling Han's eyes widened in surprise, and he said, In reality, you're already able to attempt breaking through to the eternal river tier. However, you've held back this entire time just because you wanted to cultivate the heavenly body tier to perfection? What do you think? Empress Luanxing replied haughtily. Ling Han remained silent. However, he couldn't help but admire her in his mind. As expected of the talented and bold Empress, she's gone to such great lengths and even formed 9 clones just to cultivate to a state of perfection. What if something untoward happens to one of your clones? Then I'll suffer an eternal Tao wound and lose any chance of becoming the strongest. Chapter 1144, Intimate Talk with the Empress. Chapter 1144, Intimate Talk with the Empress. So, you have to form 9 clones every time you're trying to reach the pinnacle level? Ling Han asked. Correct. Empress Luanxing nodded with a serious expression and said, The higher my cultivation level, the longer it takes for my 9 clones to reach the peak stage. This is also a test. If I insist on pursuing the pinnacle level after reaching the Eternal River tier, I mightn't have enough time to reach the Genesis tier. However, she paused for a moment before continuing, everything's changed now that there's the reincarnation tree. Things had indeed changed. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take to comprehend the Great Tao. However, the reincarnation tree could assist one in comprehending the Great Tao, with 1 day's worth of comprehension under the reincarnation tree equivalent to 1 year's worth in the outside world. Even cultivating 90 clones would be no problem, much less a mere 9 clones. Ling Han glanced at the Empress. What did she mean? She still hadn't become a member of the Ling clan yet, but she was already planning to take advantage of the Ling clan's resources? Ahem. He coughed softly and said, Although I shared my secret with you, I never said that I was going to share the reincarnation tree as well. All lands under the heaven belong to the imperial authority, Empress Luanxing said haughtily. You're a citizen of my empire, and I've already shown great generosity by allowing you to maintain possession of the reincarnation tree, yet you still want to keep all the benefits for yourself? Fuck. As expected of a ruler. So slippery. Ling Han shook his head and said, This is my most valuable treasure, so how can I share it with outsiders? It's not impossible for you to cultivate here, but look, those 4 are my followers, and this senior is... Forget about it. He's not even a person. In any case, you're not one of us, so you can't cultivate here. Notionless, Saint couldn't help but feel vexed. If he wasn't a person, then what was he? There was no need to insult him like that, was there? At the very least, he had been a saint once, okay? Sigh. I'm under someone else's roof, so I can only endure this. How could Empress Luanxing not understand Ling Han's words? One of us? What did one of us mean? She humphed in reply. This brat was indeed having dirty thoughts about her. However, she couldn't become angry no matter what. If Ling Han had genuinely been a shameless lowlife, he would have pushed her over and done her a long time ago. Why would he wait until now? What a weird person. Then what do you want? She squinted her eyes, a dangerous aura radiating from her body. Hee, you'd better think your actions through carefully, Ling Han said with a chuckle. This is my territory, so whatever I say goes. Don't act too mighty, or you'll have to be careful of being punished by me. He had wanted to smack this Empress's bottom since long ago. Although this wasn't the Empress' primary body, that didn't matter too much. Her mind and spirit were in this body, so she would definitely feel whatever this body felt. Empress Luanxing's overwhelming aura instantly weakened. If this were the outside world, she would be able to suppress Ling Han with a single hand. But here? Sorry, but this was indeed Ling Han's territory, where everything that he said went. Ling Han rubbed his hands together, and his expression was as if he eagerly wanted Empress Luanxing to act stubbornly and retort. Empress Luanxing rolled her eyes. Ling Han smiled and said, "Why did you suddenly appear just then? Wasn't it because you were jealous?" Huh. Empress Luanxing chuckled coldly and said, "Jealous? Do you think I have that much spare time?" Then why did you interfere? Ling Han asked with a smile. He didn't mind wasting time with the Empress. Why do I have to tell you? Empress Luanxing said with a cold chuckle. Ling Han grinned and said, "You asked for it." He lifted the Empress up and pressed her onto his knees. He then immediately started to act like a lowlife pervert without a word of warning. Pa. He started to smack the Empress bottom. He was most powerful being in the Black Tower apart from Small Tower. Ling Han had never considered himself to be a person of noble character, and the only thing that had stopped him from forcing himself onto the Empress was the principles that he stood by. However, they had already embraced, felt each other up, and kissed. In Ling Han's books, she was already his wife. They had already gone so far, so how could he allow the Empress to marry someone else? No way. Thus, smacking the Empress bottom didn't weigh him down with any mental burden. The Empress struggled and attempted to break free. This was far too embarrassing. Detestable, she spat through gritted teeth. However, her voice was dripping with a seductive and alluring edge. She was clearly in Hu Feiyun's body right now, so she wasn't a stunning beauty, even though she was still extremely beautiful. However, now that she possessed the Empress soul, her every move was enchanting and filled a womanly charm. Ling Han snickered and said, "So, are you going to tell me now? Do you want to die?" The Empress asked in fury. She had never imagined that Ling Han, who had been so restrained during their 2 years together, would actually do something so audacious. He was actually smacking her bottom. She could feel bursts of numbness traveling over from her bottom. It didn't hurt, yet it felt as if some unknown emotion had been lit inside her, making her involuntarily press her legs together. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Have you learned your lesson yet? Smacking this clone's bottom already felt so amazing. So how incredible would it feel to smack her primary body's bottom?" His heart shuddered as he thought of this, and he almost howled aloud in excitement. Why you win? The Empress could only submit to Ling Han. The situation left her with no other option. Ling Han still hadn't had enough yet, and he said, "Why didn't you resist for longer?" "I still haven't had enough yet." Sigh. Empress Luanxing felt as if she were about to go crazy. She really wanted to bite him to death. She humphed and said, "It's not impossible for you to marry me." They had hugged, embraced, and kissed, and she couldn't bring herself to kill this man either. Thus, it seemed as if marrying down was her only option. As an empress, She was naturally domineering and resolute. She definitely wouldn't hesitate and wallow in indecisiveness. What conditions do you have? List them out. Ling Han said confidently. I'll marry you once you advance to the Genesis tier, Empress Luanxing said. Oi, 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 that's way too insincere, Ling Han said in protest. You're so talented, yet it still took you 1,000,000 years to reach the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. If I want to marry you, won't that take 2 or even 3,000,000 years? He feels so good about himself, Empress Luanxing said in her mind. Ling Han had shown zero doubts about being able to reach the Genesis tier. His only worry was how long it would take for him to reach this level. However, was 2 or 3,000,000 years genuinely a long time? If he could reach the Genesis tier in 2 or 3,000,000 years, he would have definitely achieved a first at least. This was the case in Empress Luanxing's mind. 2 or 3,000,000 years was an incredibly short amount of time. I'm about to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. As such, reaching the eternal river tier is only a matter of time. If your cultivation level is inferior to mine, what right do you have to marry me? She said calmly. Understood. Ling Han clapped his hands and said, sit tight and wait for me. You're bound to become my wife. Empress Luanxing humphed and said, that's a matter for the future. Right now, you're still my subordinate. If you dare to She wanted to warn Ling Han, yet he unexpectedly pressed her onto his knees and started to smack her bottom again. Say, Empress, you've gotten one thing wrong. Wedding you is only a formality. Don't attempt to challenge your man's authority. Ling Han was delighted that he had another opportunity to smack the Empress' shapely bottom. Also, what's going to happen to the 9th King's soul? Chapter 1145, Ancient Divine Tribe. Chapter 1145, Ancient Divine Tribe. Why do I have to explain to you? Empress Luanxing asked haughtily. Pa. There was a crisp smacking sound. Ling Han waved his hand and said, it seems like you still don't understand the situation you're in. This smack sent a stinging sensation through her body. The mysterious feeling in her body boiled even more intensely, and it was as if she were about to explode. She didn't dare to keep going. If she was aroused and anything more happened, wouldn't she be frequently subjected to this kind of situation in the future? When this body reaches the heavenly body tier, my willpower will slowly awake and fuse with her, the Empress said. The secret techniques of the 9-snake tribe are all like this. If I'm at the mountain river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the mountain river tier. If I'm at the eternal river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the eternal river tier. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, which is to say that she doesn't know of your existence? No, she doesn't, Empress Luanxing answered. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, so, she'll disappear for good once your willpower completely awakens? The personalities of the 9 clones are all originally from my body, Empress Luanxing said in comfort. In other words, they all represent a part of me. Moreover, I can still split these 9 clones from my body when I reach the eternal river tier. Ling Han relaxed slightly upon hearing this explanation. He had a fairly good impression of the innocent and ditzy 9th king. However, another thought occurred to him, and this caused his expression to become strange. What's wrong? Empress Luanxing asked. Ling Han hesitated for a moment before saying, won't I get 9 free wives if I marry you? Holy smokes! How can I pleasure all 10 of you together? Pervert! Empress Luanxing shouted in anger. She smacked Ling Han and sent him flying. Of course, Ling Han had deliberately allowed her to send him flying. This was the Black Tower, so Empress Luanxing was definitely no match for him. However, he had already teased her for so long, so it was about time that he relented a bit. Otherwise, he would definitely feel the wrath of Empress Luanxing once they exited the Black Tower. Thus, it was better to be smacked around here and let her defuse her anger a little. He ran back and said, say, wife. Who's your wife? Empress Luanxing said in irritation. She had merely given him a chance. As of right now, Ling Han still didn't have the right to have her willingly agree to marriage. Ling Han chuckled and said, then what should I call you? Darling? Love? Empress Luan Xing stared at him, dumbfounded. She had initially thought that Ling Han was a serious person. However, who would have thought that he was actually this flippant? She shook her head, thinking that she had perhaps made an incorrect decision. However, she didn't want to correct it. "Call me Empress," she said with an emphasis. Ling Han nodded and said, "Okay. I might call you Empress now, but I'll have you call me Lord Husband in the future." That, Empress. There's only the two of us right now, so is there any need for you to refer to me like that? You're not cute at all. Ling Han sighed before saying seriously, "What the hell are the ancient divine tribes? They seem to be really impressive." "I know about this," Notionless Saint said. He was starting to seek attention again. He was a mighty saint, yet he had actually been left to the side and ignored. Did those two not know just how valuable the time of a saint was? They had the rare opportunity to learn from him, yet they actually didn't take advantage of this chance at all? Empress Luan Xing glanced at that orb of light. With this seemingly all-knowing saint present, there were some things that she couldn't keep secret. That being the case, she might as well take initiative and spill the beans. The ancient divine tribes are a collection of powerful yet lowly populated tribes. They appeared during ancient times, and all members of these tribes possess powerful abilities. "Brat, you might also be from an ancient divine tribe," Notionless Saint chimed. Ling Han's physique was incredibly powerful, and he felt that this could only be possible if Ling Han was from an ancient divine tribe. Empress Luan Xing nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head in disagreement. He had come from an ordinary family, so how could he be a member of some ancient divine tribe? The only reason for his physique and divine sense being so powerful was because he practiced the indestructible heaven scroll. Anyhow, Ling Han hadn't seen any members of the other ancient divine tribes. However, just looking at Empress Luan Xing proved just how incredible their abilities were. Members of the Nine-Snake tribe could maintain 9 clones, which was equivalent to having 9 extra lives. This was astonishing, almost unfathomable. "Time's almost up. I have to leave now," Empress Luan Xing suddenly said. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "I'll send you out." Empress Luan Xing could know about Hu Feiyun's affairs, but this was a one-sided ability. When Empress Luan Xing possessed Hu Feiyun's body, Hu Feiyun would have no clue about what was happening. This was similar to what had happened in the Heavenly Sea mystery realm. It was clearly Empress Luan Xing who had killed that demonic beast, yet Hu Feiyun thought that it was Ling Han who had killed it. Empress Luan Xing nodded, and the two of them exited the Black Tower together. "Am I empty air?" Notionless Saint murmured gloomily. Why did they both ignore him? "Senior, I have a question." "Me too." Ken Yi and the others walked over, and this instantly reignited Notionless Saint's self-confidence. He was in glowing spirits as he helped them. People needed to prove their own existence. They had to feel needed. This saint had passed away far too long ago, and thus his mental state was a far cry from what it had once been. He was already giddy with delight after being praised by a few shattering void-tier cultivators. Empress Luan Xing shuddered after exiting the Black Tower. She shut her eyes before immediately opening them again. This only took an instant, yet her disposition had already changed immensely. Her air of haughtiness disappeared, and she became an innocent and ditzy woman. "Huh? Why am I here?" Hu Feiyun asked with a puzzled expression. She bit her finger and cocked her head, appearing as confused as could be. "Wait for me here," Ling Han said. Upon seeing her nod, he went to look for Shui Yinyu. After finding her, he brought her back over here. Shui Yinyu couldn't help but feel some slight fear and respect toward Hu Feiyun. Why was her aura so terrifying? She asked Ling Han quietly. "I'll tell you later." Ling Han shook his head, then smiled at Hu Feiyun and said, "Ninth King, I'll take you to a fun place." Okay. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands in excitement. With her ditzy personality, she would even count money for the person who sold her. Ling Han enveloped the two women with his divine sense and took them to the reincarnation tree in the Black Tower. "This is the reincarnation tree," Ling Han said to Hu Feiyun. "From now on, come here every night to cultivate. That way, your cultivation will improve rapidly. I have to cultivate again? A bitter expression appeared on Hu Feiyun's face, and she said, I hate cultivating. It's so toilsome and boring. Ling Han's mind wandered to the fact that the ninth king was a personality that had been split from Empress Luanxing. This woman was ditzy, and this was a personality that Empress Luanxing didn't currently possess. She had split it from her main body, after all. This was fairly interesting. What transformations would Empress Luanxing's personality undergo when she eventually fused with her 9 clones? Don't complain, okay? Ling Han said as he patted Hu Feiyun's head. Make sure to cultivate properly. Hu Feiyun pouted upon hearing this. However, she didn't object to Ling Han patting her head. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu's eyes almost popped out in shock. That was the 9th king. The Empress had said that seeing the 9 kings was equivalent to seeing her, yet Ling Han was audacious enough to pat her head. However, little did she know that Ling Han had even smacked the Empress bottom just then. Chapter 1146, Gathering of Prodigies. Chapter 1146, Gathering of Prodigies. After appeasing Hu Feiyun and getting her to cultivate, Ling Han took Shui Yinyu to the side. The first thing he did was give her a passionate kiss. They hadn't seen each other for over 2 years, and he truly missed this beautiful and bewitching woman. Shui Yinyu tried to break free at the start, yet her body quickly went limp. She collapsed into Ling Han's embrace, and her beautiful face flushed a deep shade of red. Her eyes were as seductive as could be. Don't! She wanted to push him away, yet at the same time, she also wanted to stay in his embrace. Wife, you've been poisoned. This poison can only be cleared away if I sleep with you. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, This poison is called love, and it's the most potent poison in the world. However, if I don't sacrifice myself for you, who will? Shui Yinyu instantly wanted to roll her eyes. Ling Han was clearly aroused himself, yet he was still trying to find a seemingly legitimate excuse. He was far too shameless. However, she couldn't think straight after being passionately kissed by Ling Han, so she dazedly nodded her head. Only after a while did she realize that this was not the place for such things. However, Ling Han greedily kissed her a few more times, causing her to become even more dazed and spaced out. Right now, all she wanted was to be fiercely taken by this male. I love you, she murmured. I love you too. Ling Han moved his fingers dexterously, and Shui Yinyu's enchanting naked body quickly appeared before him. He dragged a finger across her jade-like body, completely igniting up her flames of lust. Love me. Shui Yinyu wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck. She hadn't seen her lover for 2 years, and she had been especially worried about him, even though she knew he was definitely safe. After seeing him again, her yearning for him quickly dissolved into flames of lust that seemed as if they wanted to swallow Ling Han whole. Darling! Ling Han passionately kissed this seductive beauty. He wasn't going to stop at just a taste this time. He was going to turn her into his woman. Han, be gentle, she said in a barely decipherable voice. I will. He passionately thrust inside her. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu lay among a field of flowers. Shui Yinyu was cuddled up in Ling Han's lap, a satisfied smile on her face. Baddie, you were only in a rush to do me because you actually want to marry Her Majesty. Shui Yinyu couldn't help but pinch Ling Han after hearing him explain his situation with Empress Luanxing. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head and said, That was something between you and me. It had nothing to do with others. Wife, you're so beautiful and enchanting, and I've already held back for so long. Weren't you afraid that I would be so pent up that I became sick? Damn pervert. Although they had already become one, Shui Yinyu still couldn't endure Ling Han's teasing. Her face instantly flushed red. Ling Han's lust was instantly aroused when he saw her embarrassed and seductive expression. They were cuddled together, so how could Shui Yinyu not detect his little buddy's movements? Her eyes instantly widened. Wife, it's time for round 2. Ling Han laughed loudly as he pressed Shui Yinyu under his body. Then, he started to launch a new round of attacks. Once, twice, thrice. This was Shui Yinyu's first taste of lovemaking, so she naturally couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also intoxicated by this seductive beauty, and it seemed as if he were going to forget all matters and lose himself in pleasure. The two of them only concluded their passionate lovemaking experience after 3 entire days. They finally exited the Black Tower, yet Hu Feiyun was already full of complaints. She had been cultivating under the reincarnation tree, where 1 day was equivalent to 1 year. Moreover, she had cultivated for 5 days straight, and she had almost gone crazy from boredom. She shouted that she wanted to go out. Ling Han shook his head. Who would have thought that Empress Luan Xing also had such an innocent and ditzy side to her? What would it look like if such kind of personality was displayed by the Empress? He was extremely eager to see it. After exiting the Black Tower, Shui Yinyu immediately started to move out of her old residence. She was naturally going to move in with Ling Han. That way, she could cultivate in the outside world during the day, thereby absorbing the spiritual qi and increasing her origin power. At night, she would enter the Black Tower and comprehend the great Tao under the reincarnation tree, thereby increasing the speed of her cultivation as much as possible. Ling Han could keep 3 followers, yet he had only taken 1 so far. Thus, it was entirely possible for him to let Shui Yinyu into his palace to cultivate as long as no one snitched on them. Shui Yinyu wouldn't need to relinquish her identity of an ordinary disciple, either. Shui Yinyu's main focus was on cultivation, while Ling Han's main focus was on alchemy. He needed money. His divine demon sword was still only a level 3 god tool, and he needed to elevate it to level 4, level 5, and so on. However, that would require a countless amount of level 3 and level 4 godly metal, and purchasing them would cost an astronomical amount. Ling Han did indeed have a lot of true origin stones, yet it was still far from enough. The highest level pill he could refine right now was the mysterious azure pill, with each pill being able to sell for several thousand true origin stones. As for the ingredients, he had already planted them in the Black Tower. It wouldn't be long before he could harvest them, and this would greatly reduce his expenditure. However, Ling Han wanted to refine pills of even higher levels. This was because refining a cauldron of higher level pills would take around the same time. Yet the profit that he could make would increase significantly. In addition, he definitely had to leave enough time to cultivate, and thus it was extremely important to pick the right type of pill to refine. Of course, he still hadn't obtained any higher-level pill recipe yet, so he naturally had to stick with refining the mysterious azure pill. Ling Han regretted not asking Empress Luan Xing to command the Alchemy Institution to make a copy of all of their pill recipes for him. If he had done that, he would have been able to slowly study and digest the recipes. It was a shame that he and Empress Luan Xing hadn't been on such good terms at that time. Anyhow, this didn't matter. It wasn't as if he wasn't going to return to the joint peace planet. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on his door. Fanru hurriedly went to answer the door. He returned after a while, and he handed an invitation to Ling Han. "Young Master Han, this is an invitation for you." Ling Han accepted the letter and skimmed over it. A few seed-level prodigies were hosting a gathering where they would enjoy some tea and discuss their understandings of Tao. This gathering would take place tomorrow afternoon, and all seed-level prodigies at the Mountain River tier were welcome to attend. They had all entered the sect for quite some time now, yet they still had yet to properly gather together. The timing is just right. They didn't do this just to suit me, did they? Ling Han said with a smile. He had obliterated Gan Shiyun's god tool, and he had even taken the remains as his spoils. This woman definitely wouldn't let this matter slide. Hee, there are 6 people who have formed 5 mountains and rivers, and this is a great opportunity for me to see just how strong they are. The next day, Ling Han confidently strolled toward the mountain peak by himself. This gathering was held atop the White Frost Peak. This peak was exclusive to seed-level prodigies, so it was impossible for key disciples and ordinary disciples to come and spectate their battles no matter how much they wanted to. The White Frost Peak was especially tall, yet this kind of height was nothing much to cultivators at the Mountain River tier. Ling Han was only walking at a strolling pace, yet he still arrived atop the peak in just an hour's time. Please show your invitation. This peak was extremely spacious, and there were two young men standing by either side of the entrance. Their auras were quite powerful, yet they could only stand guard at the gates. They were probably someone's followers, though they seemed quite remarkable for mere followers. One could imagine just how powerful the seed who they followed was. Ling Han handed his invitation over. One of the young men looked over it, and a hint of earnestness instantly appeared on his face. "Oh, it's young Master Han. Please enter." The peak was filled with stones of all shapes and sizes. These stones were probably seats. Right now, most of the stones were already taken. Ling Han looked around, and he saw a couple of familiar faces. Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, Duan, Quan Lishuan, the Rain Emperor, and Ding Ping. The last two clearly didn't recognize Ling Han. They hadn't heard his name yet, so they naturally wouldn't think that he was Ling Han. They merely glanced at him before retracting their gazes. Another few people arrived after him. There was Xiao Wuk, and there was also the Ditz and Hu Feiyun. There was also Gan Shiyun. She glared at Ling Han once she arrived, a baleful and frosty aura emanating from her body. Chapter 1147, Tasting Tea and Discussing Tao. Chapter 1147, Tasting Tea and Discussing Tao. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. In fact, he couldn't even be bothered to pay attention to her. He casually retrieved a divine fruit and started chomping down on it. This was only a level 2 divine fruit, so it wasn't all that valuable. However, Ling Han was genuinely eating it as if it were just a mere fruit. Many people couldn't help but label him as extravagant in their minds. Gan Shiyun almost exploded in rage. This person was actually eating fruit as if he couldn't see her at all. He was treating her threatening glare as if it were nothing. Damn it! More and more people arrived, and when the sun rose to its peak, no other person arrived. The stones were all taken, yet there were still some people who were standing. These were followers. They stood around the edges as they didn't have the right to stand closer to the center. The number of stones was definitely the same as the number of seeds. Since they were all taken, it was clear that everyone who had been invited to this gathering had arrived. This was the first gathering of the seeds, so everyone was extremely curious about the others. Moreover, each seed was filled with confidence and belief that they were invincible. Thus, they naturally wanted to take advantage of this gathering to assert their position. Hee, everyone's arrived. A man stood up and smiled at everyone before saying, "Perhaps some of you don't know who I am yet. So, let me introduce myself. I'm He Tao, and I entered the sect 900 years ago." "This person is incredibly strong," Ling Han said in his mind. He Tao's aura was obscure, and it was as deep and as profound as the sea. It was extremely likely that he had formed a fifth mountain and river, and doing so had allowed him to develop this obscure yet powerful aura. Ling Han wouldn't have thought this if he'd been on the Joint Peace Planet. However, this was the Majestic Heaven sect, a sect that was overflowing with countless supreme prodigies. Moreover, Elder Hai Yun had said that there was a total of 7 seeds who had formed 5 mountains and rivers, including him. This statement had only encompassed the mountain river tier. If it were expanded to include the sun-moon tier, the number of people would definitely be more than 7. So, he's He Tao. He can definitely rank inside the top 5 among seeds at the mountain river tier. Look, the person beside him is Wu Zhe. He's also a seed-level prodigy. In fact, he's on par with He Tao. Together with Wu Wintong, Shirangua, Shin Zhuer, and Kuang Peishan, the 6 of them are called the 6 Small Kings. There were people whispering to each other, and Ling Han understood the situation after hearing their conversation. The so-called 6 Kings were the 6 mountain river tier disciples who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Haha, this is a tea-tasting gathering, so of course there needs to be tea, He Tao said with a chuckle. He retrieved a small cauldron from his spatial spirit tool, and then placed a teapot on top of it. He started to brew tea. He wasn't using ordinary fire, but rather fire that was spitting out from his palm. There were divine patterns intertwined inside the flames, and it was clear that he was actually using the regulations of the Great Tao as his fire source. Ordinary metals would definitely be melted by such divine flames. Moreover, being as powerful as he was, perhaps even level 4 godly metal could be slowly melted by his flames. However, his cauldron was able to withstand these intense flames even though it looked small and ordinary. It showed no signs of melting under the intense heat of the divine flames. "This is no ordinary cauldron," Ling Han said in his mind. He wasn't thinking about obtaining this god tool to use as a cauldron. Rather, there was only one thought going through his mind: wanted to slash this cauldron apart and use it to elevate the quality of his divine demon sword. Theoretically speaking, the water in the cauldron should have boiled in no time, since it was being heated by such powerful divine flames. However, half an hour had passed, and not a wisp of smoke had drifted from the spout of the cauldron yet. There's extreme night frosty ice inside, so it'll take a while for it to melt." He Tao smiled and said, "However, our tea tasting and Tao discussions will go on for 4 or 5 days at the very least. So, why don't we discuss Tao first? We can taste the tea later." "What? Extreme night frosty ice?" Many people cried out in surprise. Meanwhile, some people didn't know what this was, and they only understood after listening to the explanations of others. Extreme night frosty ice only forms in the extreme southern regions of the flying cloud planet. That place is bone-chillingly cold, and it's blanketed by snow and ice all year round. Moreover, there are countless terrifying caves hidden under the snow and ice. If one steps over them, they might fall into the cave and be sealed in ice forever. Even Sun-Moon tier elites aren't willing to go to that place. After all, there aren't any precious godly medicines or valuable demonic beasts there. However, extreme night frosty ice is one of the few special local products. It's formed from the unique Great Tao of the extreme southern lands, and drinking such ice will allow one to comprehend the mysteriousness of ice. If ordinary mountain river tier cultivators come into contact with extreme night frosty ice, they'll immediately be frozen. They'll suffer grave wounds even if they don't die. As expected of senior brother he's even able to get his hands on extreme night frosty ice. How astonishing! Although prodigies were generally unwilling to admit that others were more impressive than them, the truth had already been placed in front of their eyes. If they lacked even the courage to acknowledge someone else's strength, how could they ever wish to surpass them? Thus, everyone looked at He Tao in admiration. He Tao smiled faintly as he continued to boil the extreme night frosty ice. "I only obtained this by luck. I was chasing an extreme plain ice fox, and I happened to enter an ice cave where I found a few slabs of extreme night frosty ice. I pondered for a while, and I figured that I may as well bring it back and brew some tea for my junior brothers and sisters to taste." Someone was a little puzzled, and they softly said, "It's such a small pot. Will we even get half a cup each?" The cup that he spoke of was more so the extremely small type of teacup, the kind where its content could be downed in a small mouthful. "Don't worry, there's another separate space inside the teapot. Although it's not that big, I'm sure it's big enough to provide us with enough tea," He Tao said with a smile. "Brother, he has provided us with extreme night frosty ice as tea water. I can't be greedy either, so I'll offer some serene poplar tea leaves. We can use it to make tea in a moment," Wuja chimed in. "Pooh!" Many people instantly spluttered in astonishment. In fact, they even wore expressions of excitement and eagerness. Serene poplar tea was definitely extremely valuable. It could help cultivators comprehend Tao, and even Sun-Moon tier elites wouldn't necessarily be able to obtain such tea. As expected of a member of the Six Kings, the things that they casually took out could easily astound others. Only the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping were unmoved. How could serene poplar tea move them? In terms of help to one's comprehension, how could it compare to the reincarnation tree? That was a tree that could turn 1 day's worth of comprehension into 1 year's worth. Could serene poplar tea achieve this? Moreover, they could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree every single day. Meanwhile, how many pieces of serene poplar tea leaves were there? However, there's only a limited number of tea leaves, 10 to be exact. Wuja paused for a moment before continuing. "How about this? Those who rank inside the top 10 will receive a tea leaf in their tea. What does everyone think?" Although the tea leaves would be placed in the teapot to begin with, giving the tea extremely good comprehension effects, how could a clear cup of tea compare to genuinely having a tea leaf in one's tea? Everyone nodded in approval as they rubbed their fists and prepared to fight. Since they were discussing Tao, those who were more powerful would naturally receive more benefits. This was the eternal truth of the cultivation world. The strongest would become kings. I'm Fong Jin. Which junior brother or junior sister is willing to challenge me? A youth immediately leaped out and referred to everyone else as his juniors. This was a display of confidence, and it showed that he was confident in his abilities to become a senior. Heh, I'll challenge you, another youth said as he leaped forward. Please. The two of them clasped their hands in respect before immediately launching into a fight. Their battle was extremely intense. Chapter 1148, Disciples Battle. Chapter 1148, Disciples Battle. The cultivation levels of these two people weren't high, with both of them being at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. However, they were naturally talented in their own way, or else they wouldn't have become seeds of the majestic heaven sect. For example, Fong Jin was radiating with a frosty aura that could transform into ice. As such, his opponent's attacks would be sealed by ice before they could even reach him. Meanwhile, his opponent was no pushover, either. He could transform into lightning, and this was a technique that was even more powerful than the thunderclap ninth heaven. Divine patterns hovered around his body, and he wasn't afraid to take hard hits from his opponent. Ordinary mountain river tier cultivators would stand no chance against them, even if they were one minor level above them. This was because their attacks would be ineffective against these seeds. However, although physical attacks were ineffective against them, they could still be wounded by attacks that contained intertwining divine patterns. For example, Fong Jin could wound his opponent's lightning body if he stabbed him with a sword that was formed from his frosty aura and laced with intertwining divine patterns. On the flip side, his opponent could also threaten him greatly when he launched spears of lightning toward him. The two of them quickly became serious, and they both started to unleash their full powers. Putting aside their cultivation level, their battle prowess was indeed very impressive. Sure enough, seeds couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han couldn't help but wonder whether he could suppress these two if they were at the same cultivation level. It was hard to say. Ling Han compared his battle prowess to theirs. In terms of strength, these two people were no weaker than him when he had been at the same cultivation level as them. However, this was before taking into account their trump cards. For example, he possessed the fast technique and the annihilating dragon star arrow, and these were secret techniques that could lead to huge changes in his battle prowess. In addition, Ling Han also cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, which allowed him to develop an astonishing physique. If he battled against someone at the same cultivation level, he was already set to be undefeatable. After battling for a long time, Fong Jin finally won by a small margin. Both of them retreated to rest, giving the battle arena to the next two challengers. Several other people went up to battle after them, and all of their battles were delightful and intense. They were all prodigies of the sect, and thus none of them would rely on a higher cultivation level to defeat their opponent. Everyone chose an opponent who was at the same cultivation level as them, or at least within one minor level, regardless of whether they were challenging someone or being challenged by someone. Although a difference in one minor level could also lead to a power difference of 3 stars, nothing could be done about this. There was no such thing as absolute fairness in the world. In fact, being able to win or tie while being 1 or even 2 minor levels beneath one's opponent would appear even more impressive. Achieving such a feat would exemplify one's standing as a prodigy. Although Ling Han was itching to fight, only He Tao and Wu Zhe were worthy of being his opponent. The others were genuinely too weak to pose a challenge to him. He was unwilling to pick on others, so he simply spectated the battles from his seat. Spectating battles could also aid one's comprehension, and he did indeed attain some enlightenment by watching the others battle. He was able to better combine his fast technique with the power of regulations. At its most fundamental level, cultivation can be categorized into utilizing regulations and destroying regulations. So, I can achieve the strongest Tao in the world if I'm able to unleash both of these qualities to the extreme. However, I'll need to fully comprehend the regulations if I'm to wield them to the extreme. Otherwise, how will I utilize them, and how will I destroy them? Ling Han nodded to himself. Everyone here was cultivating toward a different path, yet all of them could be of help to him. I'm Dingping, please. He was lost in thought, yet he suddenly saw his disciple leap into the battle arena. His opponent was a young and fairly good-looking woman. She wore a long crimson dress, and she appeared radiant but still extremely charming. Dingping blushed upon seeing this beauty. He was young, and the time he had spent cultivating in seclusion far outweighed the time he had spent traveling outside and training. Thus, he was sorely lacking in experience of all sorts. Lan Luan. The young woman immediately charged toward him after announcing her name. Her weapon was a sword, and a boundless sword chi swept outward as she thrust her sword forward. Even space was torn apart, with countless fissures forming in the air. This wasn't fatal, yet it was incredibly annoying. Space had been distorted, and this would affect one's movements. Perhaps one could have advanced 15 meters with a single leap normally. However, the distortion of space meant that one might only be able to advance 9 meters. Moreover, the direction of one's leap might also be different from their intended one. The blush on Dingping's face immediately disappeared once he started to exchange blows with his opponent. He had experienced several battles, so he understood just how cruel and ruthless battles could be. Once on the battlefield, his opponent was his enemy. He couldn't go easy on them just because they were a beautiful woman. He roared loudly as he charged forward and swung his fists violently. He was born special, and the composition of his bones was different from others. He could unleash his power 100-fold, and this would elevate his power by 2 stars even though he was already at the mountain river tier. This was extremely astonishing. Dingping had almost reached a state of perfection at the shattering void tier, and after reaching the mountain river tier, his power could surpass a little over 5 stars. Add to that these 2 stars of explosive power, and there was no need for him to use any secret techniques. His fists were his most powerful weapon. His power could surpass a whopping 7 stars. He was so powerful that he could easily suppress his opponent. The Prodigies were stunned upon seeing Dingping unleash his full power. Although Dingping had already entered the majestic heaven sect for a year, everyone had been working hard and cultivating before this gathering. This lad is astonishing. Power was a core attribute to cultivators. All secret techniques and martial arts techniques were built upon the basis of power. However, power was relatively hard to improve. In most cases, one's power would only be on par with their cultivation level. In fact, one would be regarded as a prodigy if their power could surpass their cultivation level by just 1 star. Even the power of seed-level prodigies like them could only surpass 5 to 6 stars. If they wanted to surpass 7 stars, they would need to form 5 mountains and rivers and break through the barrier that limited their power. It could be said that a power of 6 stars was the limit of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, Dingping had broken through this limitation and obtained a power of 7 stars. Moreover, he had done so without the help of any secret technique. His punch was extremely ordinary, and there were no divine patterns flashing around his fist. However, it appeared as indestructible as if it were a punch from God. Lan Luan's cultivation level was identical to Dingping's, with both of them being at the peak stage of the low extreme. However, her power was far weaker than his, so she was completely suppressed and unable to counterattack. She was a seed, though, so she naturally wouldn't admit defeat so easily. "Hiya!" she cried softly, and streaks of blue light burst from her slender body. They surprisingly formed dozens of palm-sized birds that swooped toward Dingping. "Huh? Those are blue-beaked birds. These are ancient divine birds, and according to legends, they once pecked a saint to death." Someone immediately yelped in surprise, revealing an astonishing rumor as they did so. Saints were the most powerful beings of the immortal realm. They were the legends of the legends. However, a blue-beaked bird had actually pecked a saint to death? What kind of terrifying existence was this? At least 100 blue-beaked birds swooped toward Ding Ping. They opened their sharp beaks, and everyone could see the swirls of divine patterns that decorated them. One could imagine just how mighty the power of their pecks would bite would definitely be no weaker than an attack from a god tool. Even saints could be pecked to death, and this proved just how powerful these birds were. Although they were only unleashed from the body of Mountain River Tier Cultivator, their might was still relatively impressive. Ding Ping was unfazed, and he continued to launch punches toward his opponent. The might of his fists compressed the air and formed layers of waves that obliterated the blue-beaked birds before they could even reach him. Lan Luan let out a shrill cry, and the blue light that was bursting from her body gathered together to form a giant blue-beaked bird. The aura that radiated from this bird instantly soared significantly. Chapter 1149. The Rain Emperor was still forceful. Chapter 1149. The Rain Emperor was still forceful. Lan Luan's cultivation level was at the peak of the low extreme of Mountain River Tier, but presently, the aura this blue-beaked bird was exuding had shockingly reached the medium extreme, and was even the late stage of the medium extreme. Her battle prowess was naturally even more frightening than before. When everyone saw this, they were all astounded. This was equivalent to boosting her battle prowess by a whole minor level. The battle prowess of people like them would be capable of surpassing 5 stars, and with a boost of another minor level, the battle prowess would directly spike to 9 stars. This was really too shocking. However, to deliver this kind of attack, the strain on Lan Luan was also exceedingly heavy. Her beautiful face had turned completely pale, and there was blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Her life essence had suddenly dropped greatly. Perhaps delivering this attack would even shorten her lifespan itself. This young girl really had a powerful competitive spirit. It was merely a spar, and she actually shortened her own lifespan. Even if she won, it would be damaging her opponent by paying the price of damage to herself. Ding Ping rushed forward with a great shout, but the moment his fists came into contact with that blue-beaked bird, his whole person was sent flying out. With a bang, he collapsed onto the ground, and his hands were severely injured. His arms were completely bloody. Lan Luan did not appear to be any better. She sat abruptly on the ground, covered by sweat, an air of weakness exuding from her. If this blow of hers had not succeeded, then it would have been definitely impossible for her to deliver a second attack. She could only claim to have won narrowly. However, Ding Ping had not used any powerful moves before he had been defeated by this powerful move which she had expended her life essence in return for. In truth, this was reasonable. After all, they were in the same cultivation level. The Rain Emperor leaped out, grabbed Ding Ping, and brought him to stand beside the rock. He couldn't help but shake his head. Actually, he was more in favor of Ding Ping's victory, but this guy seemed to have fallen for his opponent, and actually did not make any powerful moves, and chose to take her attack head-on instead. Wasn't this seeking his own defeat? After he placed Ding Ping down, he strode down into the arena and called out, "Who would battle with me?" Though he had laid down his identity of an emperor, he had not abandoned the pride that belonged to one. In terms of bearing, there were really not many people here that could be a match for the Rain Emperor, though he was still only in the early stage of the medium extreme. "Haha, I shall." A young man wearing a green shirt leaped out. He was dressed completely in rich robes, and was also wearing a great number of ornaments. Furthermore, each of the ornaments he was wearing exuded a vague aura. They were definitely out of the common run. This man either had to be a newly rich upstart, or his clan was too noble if he was wearing so many accessories. That is Chao Xian. Chao? Someone from the Chao clan? That's right. It is that Chao clan. Gasp! Chao clan was a great clan, and had once produced a great elite of the Eternal River Tier very, very long ago, possessing supreme glory once. But when that great elite dispersed into Dao, the Chao clan had no qualified successors to carry on their undertakings. As a result, they were naturally not as glorious as they once had been. This Chao Xian had ambition and desired to revive the glory of his ancestors. Indeed, he was amazingly talented. However, he was too arrogant, thinking that not one person in this place could be his equal. At most, all of you will only be capable of reaching the heavenly body tier, but I am the one who will reach the eternal river tier. However, his cultivation level presently was still too weak, merely in the late stage of the medium extreme of mountain river tier. After all, he was too young, and had only cultivated for close to 100 years. Yet, he had managed to reach this level after a mere century. This was very impressive. As his cultivation level increased, the Rain Emperor began to look younger and younger, but no matter how much younger, it was impossible that he would regain his looks from when he was in his teens and 20s. Presently, he looked to be about 27 to 28 years old, and among this group of young people, he appeared to be much older. There was nothing to be done. In terms of actual age, the Rain Emperor was younger than the majority of them, but who asked him to have already been close to 60 years old when he finally stepped into the flower blossom tier? In everyone's eyes, this was proof that the Rain Emperor lacked sufficient talent. Wasn't it? For prodigies like them, who had broken through to the flower blossom tier when they were merely 7 or 8 years old, their bodies would only grow, but would not age in the slightest. What did aging signify? That your cultivation level would not be able to keep up, and your life essence would be greatly lost. Otherwise, why would one have aged? Chao Xian bore a smile on his face, though he was internally disdainful. He was actually a seed just like this kind of trash. This was practically an insult to him. Fine then, he would give this person a lesson. The best scenario would be that he could let the Rain Emperor withdraw from the sect of his own volition to avoid pulling his own standing as a seed. Here I come. He had a very low opinion of Rain Emperor, and when he pressed down with his palm in attack, it was done very carelessly. The Rain Emperor made his move. Hong, his forceful presence surged in all directions, his fists falling like rain. What? A shocked expression immediately appeared on Chao Xian's face. He had not thought that the Rain Emperor's attack would be so fierce. He was indeed powerful, but he might not be stronger than the Rain Emperor. Hence, now that the Rain Emperor had taken the initiative, he was naturally forced into retreat, and could only defend himself against the incoming attacks. How rich and abundant was the Rain Emperor's battle experience! It could be claimed that if the two of them had the same cultivation level and trump cards, even Ling Han was not sure he could be able to defeat the Rain Emperor. Now that he had the upper hand, his attacks were endless and pervasive. Who could underestimate the Rain Emperor? As someone who had broken through to the Mountain River tier with 19 stars of strength, though he had not perfected his cultivation, 1 star of strength on Shattering Void tier would have an influence of half a star at most in the Mountain River tier. It would definitely not lead to a world of difference. Pong, 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 pong. The Rain Emperor continued his fury of attacks, and Chao Xian was forced into retreat. When he had taken his 17th step back, Chao Xian spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying with a single punch. Thanks for the win. The Rain Emperor stopped his attack. This was merely a spar, so he naturally had to take care not to overdo it with his attack. Chao Xian leaped up, and his face was completely flushed. How could this be endured? He had looked down greatly on the Rain Emperor, yet did not even manage to get a chance to fight back before he was defeated by the Rain Emperor. This was practically a plaque of humiliation on the path of his cultivation. He was someone who would become an elite of the Eternal River tier, so how could he accept this kind of terrible defeat? Again, he leaped out. This time, he dared not be careless again. The light of great Tao surged from his whole body, and interwoven divine patterns appeared, boosting his battle prowess to the peak. The spectators looked on, and they were all shaking their heads internally. You had already lost, yet were so sore about your defeat. That would only lead to others having an even lower opinion of you. Thus, talent was only one factor of the equation. This was the prerequisite for becoming an elite, but if you wanted to become an elite, mere talent was far from enough. But they had to admit that the present Chao Xian was very strong, and could definitely not be taken lightly. The Rain Emperor humphed coldly. He had also been angered as well. He looked down on such a sore loser. Then, he merely had to punch him out again. He shot out a punch at Chao Xian. Pong, pong, pong. One punch followed after another. Though Chao Xian was prepared this time, he was still forced into a retreat by the Rain Emperor's attacks. He was actually still being completely subdued. Hey, why is this guy's fist technique so frightening? In terms of power, it would be Chao Xian who is slightly superior, but why would he be at a disadvantage in a head-on exchange of blows? That person's fist technique is too powerful. Every punch seemed to have condensed the bearing of heaven and earth. Hiss, he has the potential to become a grandmaster of his era. The people here all knew what was what, and they were incredibly stunned. The Rain Emperor's cultivation level could not be considered the apex in this place, but in terms of fist techniques, he had far surpassed all the so-called seeds, and reached a height that others could only look up to. Second brother's fist technique is close to Dao. Haha, this is worthy of celebration. Ling Han murmured quietly, a smile appearing on his face. In the Great Tomb in the Galaxy, he had seen the sword of the Great Dao, and the Rain Emperor's fist technique seemed to be similarly boosted by Great Dao, so its might was naturally incredible. However, he had been inspired after obtaining the sword of the Great Dao, and only then did he comprehend his own path, while the Rain Emperor had completely relied on his own comprehension abilities. With such a comparison, even Ling Han had to admit he was convinced of the Rain Emperor's genius. This second brother of his was really born an extraordinary genius of martial arts. Chapter 1150, Vile Conduct. Chapter 1150, Vile Conduct. The Rain Emperor had truly been angered, and after 10 punches, Chao Xian was once again sent flying. Too powerful. They were obviously of similar cultivation levels. Chao Xian was even 2 sub-minor levels higher than him, but within 10 moves, he was already defeated. This was too unbelievable. It should be known that they were all seeds, and were all super geniuses. With similar cultivation levels, it should have been a closely locked battle no matter what. Yet, the result was a completely one-sided battle. Moreover, the Rain Emperor's cultivation level was slightly lower, and there was a gap of 2 stars of power. Yet Ling Han knew that the path the Rain Emperor walked was a path of forcefulness and ferocity. If he could win, then about 10 moves would be enough, and if the battle dragged onto from 10 to 100 moves, it was proof that the Rain Emperor was actually at a disadvantage. Chao Xian had been defeated twice, and his face was no longer flushed red. Instead, he bore a livid expression. He could no longer find the face to stay here. Covering his face, he left. If he stayed here any longer, the looks from all the spectators would be like swords and knives, and might cause him to collapse. The Rain Emperor's fighting spirit burned, and he asked, "Who else would do battle with me?" Everyone looked at each other. Those who had a similar cultivation level with the Rain Emperor had absolutely no certainty that they could defeat the Rain Emperor, and for those whose cultivation levels were higher than the Rain Emperor, they could not find the nerve to make a move. Previously, even Chao Xian, who was in the late stage of the medium extreme, had been easily defeated. Then, it was obvious that the late stage of the medium extreme was not quite good enough. But if one was in the high extreme, this gap was a little too big, wasn't it? Who would have the nerve to take that kind of advantage? Hence, the Rain Emperor asked for a battle. Though there was more than 100 people here, still, no one accepted his challenge. Ho, we can't let the atmosphere get cold. How about this? I'll come and fight. Wu Zhi stood up. The others all looked at one another. This was one of the 6 king tiers. If he made a move, aside from He Tao, who would be able to match him? Moreover, the gap between cultivation levels was really too huge, wasn't it? Could this even be considered a spar? To be fair, I will seal off my cultivation level, and we shall battle with the same cultivation level, Wu Zhi said. He pressed a few times on some parts of his body, and true enough, his aura immediately dropped to a level about similar to the Rain Emperor's. "Junior brother, is this fair?" he asked with a smile. The Rain Emperor did not answer. Instead, he merely shouted, and fighting spirit burned strongly in his eyes. Then, he began a mad barrage of attacks towards Wu Zhi. Pong, 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 pong. His punches fell like rain, and even someone as strong as Wu Zhi could actually only parry, and was forced into continuous retreat. Everyone was shocked, struck mute with astonishment. That was Wuxia, one of the 6 publicly acknowledged king tiers. They were capable of sweeping aside all mountain river tier cultivators, and only the other 5 would qualify to be a match for him. But now, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, it was actually the Rain Emperor who was pressing down on Wuxia. This was really an incredible shock. When the Rain Emperor, too, reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier in future, wouldn't there be 7 great king tiers then? Although there was a serene smile on Wuxia's face, he was actually cursing internally. He, too, had not foreseen that the Rain Emperor's fist technique would be as powerful as this. When he had watched earlier, he had only thought it was fierce, but now that he himself was on the receiving end, he realized that the latter's fist technique was practically close to heavenly Tao. Every attack of his fist was like the heavens itself pressing down on him. He was completely incapable of resisting. It was not that he had no means of fighting back, but in terms of power, it had to be a complete domination. But now that their cultivation levels were the same, what did he have that could dominate over the Rain Emperor? He could not accept the result of being defeated, even if he had suppressed his cultivation level. As a king tier, how could he lose in a battle of equal cultivation levels? He suddenly threw out a punch and forcefully greeted the Rain Emperor with his own attack. Pong! The 2 fists crashed into each other, and all of a sudden, a frightening shock wave was generated. Even if all the people here were seed-level geniuses, they still had to stretch out a shield of origin power. Otherwise, if they were scraped by this gust of wind, it would definitely not be a pleasant experience. Wuxia and the Rain Emperor pulled back at the same time. Tung, tung, tung. Wuxia took 7 steps back, whereas the Rain Emperor retreated 9 steps. In terms of power, he was at a slight disadvantage, but the difference was that there was blood seeping out of the Rain Emperor's fist. His arm was also visibly bent and broken. It was obvious that the bone was broken. In this clash, the Rain Emperor had lost completely. As expected of senior brother Wu, his place as one of the 6 king tiers had definitely not come through boasting. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he is invincible. The spectators praised. This result was what they had imagined. Yet Ling Han's eyes frosted over as he stared at Wuxia. Just now, the number of divine patterns that had flickered on Wuxia's fist were as many as 91. This meant that though he had not used power above the medium extreme, he had used the power of regulations. Of course, it was not fair. Though power was the most important factor of a cultivator, regulations should similarly not be underestimated. Just like in the large galactic tomb, the power of that stone statue formation had not changed the whole time, but because the might of the divine patterns increased, the might of the stone statue formation had correspondingly risen as well. This should not have been possible for a cultivator to do, but Wuxia, one with a superior cultivation level, facing an opponent of an inferior cultivation level in a situation wherein power was unchanging, could increase the might of his divine patterns. The results could be claimed to be exactly the same as the stone statue formation's workings. Wuxia had done this very secretly, but how could he possibly fool Ling Han, who possessed the Eye of Truth? You dare to bully my second brother? Fury abruptly surged within Ling Han. He glared fixedly at Wuxia. He would definitely avenge this loss. The Rain Emperor was a straightforward character. He, too, had sensed something off, but a loss was still a loss. There was no excuse. Hence, he nodded and said, "I have lost." While speaking, he retreated back to his original position and Saturday. "Thank you for the battle." Wuxia made a pretense of being modest. "Senior brother disciple Wu, please fight me." Ling Han was just about to walk down into the arena when he saw someone was a step earlier than he. He had already leaped into the arena before him, so Ling Han could only choose to temporarily abandon his plans. This person was Su Jing. "Please." Wuxia released the restrictions on his cultivation level. His opponent was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so there was no need for him to deliberately suppress his cultivation level. As a senior disciple, I will limit my moves to 10. As long as junior brother Su can take 10 moves from me, it will be considered my loss. How confidently had he spoken such words? But it was not going too far. If he did not suppress his cultivation level, he possessed the power of 5 mountain rivers, and his strength would reach 7 stars at least. Even if there was only a gap of a single star between 6 and 7 stars, this gap of a single star was extremely massive. Su Jing did not dare be careless. His opponent was a king tier of mountain river tier, and had truly stood on the pinnacle of this domain. His strength had exceeded all imagination. He used a powerful move at the first instance. Endless divine light entwined around his entire body, and in a single instant, his body had turned into a volcano. There were bright crimson flows of lava surging all over his body, and he breathed very hot air from his nostrils. Was this still human? This was obviously a giant of lava and fire. Wu Zhu indulged him calmly. Someone who had not formed his 5th mountain river could not possibly know how powerful this cultivation level was. Even if there was only an additional star of strength, this was the pinnacle level. It was even harder to cultivate than the sun-moon tier. If one could not sweep aside all mountain river tier cultivators below this cultivation level, then what was the point of cultivating the pinnacle level in the first place? Su Jing shot out a palm strike, and the area was completely covered with crimson flames as lava gushed. It was as if doomsday had come. Everyone quickly put up a shield of origin power. This was battle prowess on the level of consummate level, and could not be compared to the previous battles at all. Boom, boom, boom. Su Jing attacked continuously, and Wu Zhi merely parried his blows casually. He appeared so completely careless and very much at ease. 9 moves. Wu Zhi smiled and said, "Please be careful, junior brother Su. I am about to counterattack." Chapter 1151, Might of King Tier. Chapter 1151, Might of King Tier. Wu Zhi shot out a palm strike, and it was as if the sky had collapsed and like a star had fallen. Pung! Su Jing was instantly sent flying. Although he had once been praised as a king tier in the young generation, showed disdain for his peers, and had even managed to trample all over the elites of the mountain river tier from the previous generation against a true king tier, he could only accept his defeat. After all, Wu Zhi had formed his 5th mountain river, and this was a qualitative domination. He was really too strong. However, it was not that Su Jing did not have a chance to catch up, or even surpass his opponent. As long as he, too, could form his 5th mountain river, anything was possible. But before that, he could only admit his defeat. Senior brother disciple Wu, I, too, would like to ask for your guidance. Xiao Cixi nimbly walked down into the arena. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. Why did everyone have to fight over the chance to fight with him? Forget it. You guys go ahead. When no one was left to challenge Wu Zhi, he would make his move. Wu Zhi looked at Xiao Cixi, a stunned light flashing in his eyes. Beautiful women were a resource, but they were very common. After all, the population of the immortal realm was too large, so a few great beauties could still be found somewhere. However, a beautiful woman that had the 3 merits of being incredibly talented in martial arts world, having potential to become a king tier, and coming from a powerful background was definitely a scarce resource. This beauty in front of him possessed all those merits, so she naturally would make men fall in love with her. It could be claimed that even if her cultivation level was slightly lower, and her natural talent slightly weaker, she could still make many men willingly fall at her feet. Junior sister, please. Wu Zhi's tone was gentle, exhibiting the tender and kind nature of a senior brother. He Tao smirked coldly. He naturally was aware of Wu Zhi's true nature. However, he did not believe that Xiao Cixi would be fooled by a few words from Wu Zihao. Could such a lovesick girl be nurtured and prioritized by her clan? Please do not be too strict on me, senior brother disciple. Xiao Cixi bowed delicately, showing off her womanly charms to the fullest. This show of weakness would naturally not engender the disdain of others. Instead, they would only think that she was well-behaved and respectful to her seniors. Their opinion of her would rise accordingly. A great many men were looking at her, captivated. Only Gan Shiyun was spitting internally, because this was a trick that she, too, liked to use. True enough, Wu Zhi's expression became even more indulgent, and his smile widened as he said, "Junior sister, please." Xiao Cixi's hands shook, and she actually drew a long spear. It was as long as 9 meters, and when she wielded it, it added a soldierly yet beautiful air to her bearing. Added with the fact that she was extraordinarily beautiful in the first place, she was even more attractive than before. Even one with Wu's mental state could not help but feel his heart throb. The others, who were even more unable to bear it, even swallowed. Go! Xiao Cixi wielded her spear and began her attack on Wuja. The spear spat out lightning, and it was like a dragon of lightning, extremely frightening. And Wuja was slightly stunned. Her abilities really could not be underestimated. Whoever thought she only had beauty and was a mere pretty face would be making a serious mistake. The spear pierced towards him, and one lightning bolt after another appeared from the body of the spear. They formed multiple snakes of lightning that spat out the fury of lightning at Wuja. Quite interesting, Wuja commented, smiling. If he had not formed his 5th mountain river, then he would really have been flustered by this strike in front of him. This woman could definitely become a formidable opponent to him. However, at present, his abilities were far above hers. Someone who had not formed the 5th mountain river could definitely not imagine how powerful this cultivation level was. He merely pushed out with his right hand. Wong, a navy blue hand of origin power appeared and grabbed out at the spear. A mighty aura rolled out without bounds and instantly suppressed Xiao Cixi's own aura. This really was not fearing someone who didn't know what was what, but fearing to be compared. When Xiao Cixi made her move just now, all were shaken. Who would dare to underestimate this woman? But as Wuja made his own move forcefully, it completely suppressed Xiao Cixi's performance. This gap was really not just a little bit. Boom! The giant hand fell, and the spear's course was suddenly blocked. Then, it actually twisted as if it could not endure the massive pressure, and was about to break at any moment from the force. Xiao Cixi gave a soft shout, and endless flashes of lighting surged all over her body, her power spiking suddenly. Junior sister's abilities and talent are extremely impressive. Unfortunately, there is still a large gap between you and me. Without forming your 5th mountain river, you are ultimately still immortal. Wuja stretched out a hand and pushed at empty air. The might of that large hand abruptly rose further and forcefully pushed back at Xiao Cixi. A frightening power attacked, and Xiao Cixi hurriedly shook her right hand. The spear actually broke apart by itself. However, it was not broken, but had rather formed a shield in front of her, blocking this attack from Wuja. So it seemed that her spear had not been forged out from a single piece of godly metal, but rather had been formed from innumerable small chains locking together. It could change form according to her will. Shua, Xiao Cixi's right hand waved, and the shield once again formed a spear, which she brandished towards Wuja. Ha ha ha! Wuja laughed loudly, not worried in the slightest. The large hand continued to fall, and suppressed Xiao Cixi to the point that she had no choice but to admit her defeat in just a few moves. Duan, Luo Jingren, Xiaowuk, and the others walked down into the arena to challenge him in succession, but they were all easily defeated by Wuja, who showed the might of a king tier to the fullest. As expected of senior brother disciple Wu, he is too strong. So one could really form the 5th mountain river in the mountain river tier. I have always thought that this was a mere rumor. No wonder senior brother disciple Wu can become a king tier. After he formed the 5th mountain river, he could practically be considered to have achieved the sun-moon tier. It is a definite one-sided domination over other mountain river tier cultivators. I don't know if there is anyone who could take 10 moves from senior brother disciple Wu. What a joke. Have you seen any mountain river tier cultivator being able to take 10 moves from a sun-moon tier elite? It is definitely impossible. Everyone was filled with praise and did not hide their admiration for Wuja. Indeed, it was really too difficult to form the 5th mountain river. Yet Su Jing merely hummed quietly and said, "If it is merely a question of taking 10 moves, I feel that there is one person who is completely capable of accomplishing that." Xiao Cixi's eyes lit up immediately and quipped, "That's right." Duan nodded as well and said, "If that person was able to come, then there really would be a possibility that he could force senior brother disciple Wu to use more than 100 moves. Everyone was shocked. Who would they be speaking of that had managed to obtain the unanimous admiration of a few seed-level prodigies? Oh, and who is this person? Wuja asked with a smile, but there was a sliver of disdain in the depths of his gaze. What a joke. Without forming the fifth mountain river, who would be able to be a match for him? Ling Han, Xiao Sisi, Duan, Su Jing, and the others replied simultaneously. Perhaps the battle wouldn't be resolved even with 100 moves. It may have to be dragged to more than 1,000 moves. Even Xiaowuk spoke up. It was slightly unexpected that he would actually have such a high opinion of Ling Han. Wuja couldn't help but get irritated. The battle wouldn't be resolved even with 1,000 moves? What kind of jokes were they spouting? The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping shared a look. One broke into a slight smile, while the other was incredibly proud. Oh, and who could this Ling Han be that he would be described so amazingly by junior sister and junior brother disciples? Why have I not seen him come to the sect? Wuja asked. Xiao Sisi shook her head and replied, when the large galactic tomb opened, he had entered with us. He even agreed to reunite with us in the majestic heaven sect, but I never thought that there would be no signs of him after our last meeting. This is really odd. Ha 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 ha. All of a sudden, a few seeds laughed loudly. The conversation had carried on for so long, and that person they spoke of hadn't even managed to enter the sect? Was he even qualified to be considered a prodigy? Chapter 1152. Who is Ling Han? Chapter 1152. Who is Ling Han? What are you laughing at? Hu Feiyun leaped out. Ling Han is the most awesome, the very strongest. Everyone was astonished. They had not expected yet another person to speak up for Ling Han. They were all seeds here. What seed-level prodigy was not proud and arrogant? Yet Ling Han himself had not even appeared, but had already engendered the extreme admiration of several seeds. This was really unimaginable. They became curious as well, wanting to see this mysterious man. How powerful exactly was this man, and how charismatic was he? Yet flames of jealousy were ignited in Wuja's heart because these two extreme beauties, Hu Feiyun and Xiao Sisi, had shown a fondness for Ling Han. Hu Feiyun was even more so. She looked like she would come to blows with anyone who dared to speak badly of Ling Han. And this man had not even been qualified to enter into the majestic heaven sect. He was very displeased. Just think. As one of the 6 king tiers, usually, innumerable female disciples in the sect would throw themselves at him. However, his whole heart was concentrated on cultivation, so he had completely no interest in them. It was so rare that he had seen there were a few extremely beautiful women among the seeds this time, yet all of them exhibited great admiration for another man. Damn it, he had better not meet this Ling Han in future, or he would definitely beat him to death. What a joke. Since he is as powerful as you senior disciples claim, why had he not been recruited by the sect? A youth in green asked coldly. It was precisely Fu Liangye, who had been struck back by a sword light from Ling Han several days ago during the selection for followers. At this moment, his hand was still wrapped in bandages. Though that was merely a casual sword light from Ling Han, his martial intent was contained within. How could it be so easily expelled? Without expelling the martial intent, this wound would not heal. The way I see it, he is just a piece of trash. Everything is mere boasting, he said disdainfully. Rubbish. Ding Ping jumped out immediately. Pointing at Fu Liangye, he exclaimed, apologize now. And what relation do you have with this matter? Fu Liangye did not dare be careless. Though this youth had been defeated by Lanluan, his abilities themselves were incredibly powerful and forceful. He might not have a good chance of winning. Because Ling Han is my master, Ding Ping said with utmost seriousness. Without Ling Han, he wouldn't be where he was now. To Ding Ping, Ling Han was truth. One word from Ling Han, and he would even dare to brandish his fists at a saint. So how could he allow others to speak badly of Ling Han? Everyone experienced a great shock. Instantly, Ling Han's image was heightened endlessly. Someone who could nurture a seed-level disciple. How amazing was that? Fight me. Ding Ping shouted loudly. His fury soared high, and there were multiple flashes of divine light exuding from all over his body. He was much stronger than when he usually was. Huh. Ling Han was surprised. This disciple of his was really extraordinary. Could it be that with his fury, he was about to have an explosive burst of energy? Or could it be that he had awakened some ancient battle prowess, so he could push his battle prowess to a new height? Fu Liangye humphed coldly and declared, I am in the medium extreme, and I can't be bothered to bully you. Firstly, he was not sure that he could defeat Ding Ping, and secondly, his arm was still injured, so his battle prowess was far from his prime condition, so he was naturally afraid to do battle. In case he lost, and lost to an opponent in a lower cultivation level, what face would he have left? Ding Ping still wanted to challenge him further when he saw the Rain Emperor leap out. The latter pressed a hand on his shoulder and shook his head at him. Ding Ping could only give up his idea. He was his second uncle, and with the absence of his master, he naturally had to obey the words of his second uncle. I, too, am in the medium extreme, so if I battle you, it would not be considered bullying you, right? The Rain Emperor asked in a deep voice. Fuck. Fu Liangye felt baffled. Didn't he just speak a few bad words about a person that no one had seen before? Actually, it couldn't even be considered bad words. Wasn't that just stating the facts as they were? Why was it that it seemed like he had punched a hole into the sky, with endless troubles following on his heels? All of them wanted to challenge him. And what relation do you have with that Ling Han? He asked. He was even more cautious with the Rain Emperor. He had witnessed the latter's abilities, and even Wuxia was forced into a continuous retreat after he suppressed his cultivation level, and even was not capable of fighting back at one point. Fighting with Ding Ping, he still had a chance of winning, but if he battled with the Rain Emperor, he did not even have the slightest confidence he could win. The Rain Emperor brandished his fist and replied, Ling Han is my fourth brother. Pooh! Everyone was once again shocked. The disciple was a seed. The brother was also a seed. Your whole family had to be monsters, right? That was a little too strong, wasn't it? Come fight me, the Rain Emperor called out severely. Fu Liangye's expression changed drastically, but no matter how confident he was in himself, he did not dare battle with the Rain Emperor, what more when he was currently still injured. However, he was the kind that could go with the flow, and immediately said, I have not chosen my words well, and was rude and impetuous. So he had yielded. Making a seed-level genius yield and apologize in public was a humiliation, but compared to being defeated in public, this was definitely much better. Hence, Fu Liangye had still made a wise decision. Only then did the Rain Emperor nod and return to his initial position where he sat back down. How domineering. As everyone watched, they could not help but develop an impression of the Rain Emperor. Though this man's cultivation level and abilities were not at the pinnacle, that domineering air was truly intimidating. There were definitely not many that could match him in this place. Wuxia's expression looked slightly ugly. At first, he had already taken control of the atmosphere, and everything had been centered on him. He'd been the only focal point, but now, his spotlight had been snatched away by a person that had not even been seen before. Senior brother Disciple Wu, you have fought so many rounds, so you should take some rest and let me have the stage. A young man in white jumped out, wearing a dazzling smile on his face. Junior brother Zhang. Wuxia's gaze jumped to him, and a sliver of caution appeared in his eyes. This person's name was Zhang Long. In the past, he had been equally famous as he. Their battle prowess was equally matched, but 100 years ago, Wuxia took a crucial step and formed his fifth mountain river. Zhang Long, however, had not succeeded even until now, and the gap between the two of them was rapidly enlarged. But Wuxia did not take this Zhang Long lightly, because the latter's talent was really no worse than his own. It could only be said that he was not as fortunate, and that was why he had kept failing. But who knew when Zhang Long would advance into the pinnacle level and become capable of being on equal footing with him? Wuxia thought for a moment and stepped back with a nod, letting him have the stage. Ho, then I shall let junior brother Zhang have it. He had already exhibited enough of his power, and there was no need for him to continue showing off. Too far was as bad as not enough. Zhang Long's eyes swept over the masses. His eyes were obviously very gentle, but anyone who became the target of his gaze felt coldness rise up from the bottom of their heart as if they were being targeted by a venomous snake. Involuntarily, they lowered their heads and dared not look him in the eye. He was an elite, and even if he hadn't formed his fifth mountain river, he was more or less as powerful. He had powerful abilities that could crush all his peers. Finally, his eyes stopped on Ling Han. "Junior brother disciple, how about we spar?" he asked, issuing his own challenge. Everyone was surprised. Zhang Long actually wanted to challenge Ling Han. It should be known that Zhang Long had not entered into the Majestic Heavens sect just over a year ago, but had been in the sect since 900 years ago. In such a great sect, he had been trained for 900 years. Even if he had not formed his fifth mountain river, his power would definitely surpass that of any ordinary cultivator in the peak stage of the mountain river tier. Gan Shiyun smirked icily. She had sacrificed a high-grade godly metal in exchange for Zhang Long's undertaking of this task. She wanted to teach Ling Han a harsh lesson and cause him to be humiliated publicly. Chapter 1153, Let You Have the First Three Moves. Chapter 1153, Let You Have the First Three Moves. "Junior brother Han, do you dare battle me?" Zhang Long asked calmly. He had indeed received a piece of high-grade godly metal from Gan Shiyun, but this was not the reason that he was willing to move, because he enjoyed trampling over the pride of geniuses, and the more of a genius they were, the happier he was. Ling Han stood up and said, "Since you are asking to be defeated, I will naturally oblige." How boastful this guy was. They hadn't even battled yet, and he already thought that he would win. Wasn't he afraid that he would be smacked in the face by reality if he went too far and was too confident in his words? Zhang Long's expression darkened and said, "I entered the sect 900 years before you did, so you should respectfully address me as senior brother." Who is the senior brother, and who is the junior brother? Shouldn't it be decided by abilities? Ling Han asked calmly. "If I advance into the Sun-Moon tier someday, junior brother Zhang would still have to address me as my lord." Fuck. His self-confidence was really full to burst. Everyone shook their heads. Though Ling Han was indeed very strong, having defeated Gan Shiyun before even entering the sect, Gan Shiyun had only entered the sect for over a year, after all. Hence, her abilities would be limited. Zhang Long, however, was completely different. He had already been in the sect for 9 centuries, and had been taught many secret techniques of the sect. Though he had not formed his fifth mountain river, he definitely had to have cultivated mountain river tier to perfection. Below the fifth mountain river, he should be invincible. Haha. Zhang Long laughed coldly. "You are very arrogant, but I like opponents like you, for I can trample all over you. You would become cut and bruised all over, and be thoroughly discredited. Could it be that you don't worry that you might be the one who would be stomped into the ground, and be so ashamed that you would not be able to show your face?" Ling Han shook his head. "This joke is not the slightest bit amusing." Zhang Long humphed. "I was not joking." Ling Han strove to be contrary. Zhang Long's expression became colder and colder. With a wave of his hand, he declared, "Then come fight. On the basis that you entered the sect earlier than I will let you have the first 3 moves." Ling Han placed his arms behind his back. Arrogance. Zhang Long was furious, and suddenly charged at Ling Han in attack. Boom. Though he had not formed his fifth mountain river tier, he had polished his cultivation in mountain river tier to the pinnacle. His origin power was incredibly dense, and as he attacked, it was as if the sky itself was pressing down, having the forceful and invincible bearing of mountain river tier. Ling Han's feet moved, and he calmly retreated, dodging his opponent's attack by a hair's breadth. Boom, boom, boom. The 3 moves were delivered, and Ling Han had indeed dispersed all the attacks without even fighting back. Gasp! Everyone was stunned. This was slightly strong. Previously, Zhang Long's abilities had already been analyzed. Aside from the 6 king tiers, who else could confidently say they could let Zhang Long have the first 3 moves here? But Ling Han did not only say these words, he also did as he said. This man's abilities were deep and unmeasurable. Even Wu Jia and He Tao looked slightly surprised. They had not thought that Ling Han would be so powerful. I have already let you have the first 3 moves, so I might as well handicap myself by using only one arm as well. Ling Han continued to place his right arm behind his back and merely waved his left arm. This? Aren't you looking down on your opponent too much? That was Zhang Long. Gan Shiyun was shocked, but also pleased internally at the same time. This time, Ling Han had really offended Zhang Long to the fullest. Now, even without her saying so, Zhang Long would definitely be more than pleased to get rid of Ling Han. Good, very good. She did not believe that with Zhang Long's abilities, he would still be unable to defeat Ling Han. If that was so, the seed-level genius he was and the 900 years of cultivation he had after entering the sect would have been a complete waste of time. Zhang Long seethed in anger. He was truly angered now. Letting his opponent have the first 3 moves, handicapping oneself by using just one arm, these should have been his lines. But now, he was treated in this manner by a junior. This caused him to feel greatly humiliated. Junior brother, you've asked for this. His eyes were sinister and cold. All of a sudden, a blood-red flash appeared. His skin instantly became blood-red, and his body suddenly swelled. Pa. The fabric on his arms was immediately torn forcefully, revealing 2 furry clawed paws. That was right. They were not arms, but rather tiger-like legs with claws. His 2 arms had currently turned into clawed tiger paws, and there were close to 70 divine patterns flickering on them, exuding a blood-red halo. Hiss, what kind of secret technique is this? Why do I feel like Zhang Long's abilities had surpassed the level of the mountain river tier? Someone exclaimed in surprise. He was obviously a seed-level genius, yet had already turned pale from the aura that Zhang Long was exuding now. No, it hasn't surpassed the mountain river tier. The reason why you feel this way is because your cultivation level is still a bit too low. This is a strange technique that senior brother Zhang has cultivated. It is called Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique. The moment he uses it, his power and speed would be increased greatly. Senior brother Zhang has already cultivated the mountain river tier to the peak stage in the first place, so his power could surpass 6 stars. And now, added with the Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique, it is very possible his power could leap into 7 stars. That would be the power of the pinnacle level. Some senior brothers who had entered the sect earlier explained Zhang Long's current condition. He had not formed his 5th mountain river tier, yet he had broken through the pinnacle of the 4 minor levels of mountain river tier with other means. However, secret techniques would still have a limited duration, unlike truly forming 5 mountain rivers, which would be a permanent increase in power. Furthermore, did forming 5 mountain rivers mean that he wouldn't be able to cultivate a secret technique? Zhang Long shouted fiercely and brandished his clawed hand in an attack at Ling Han. Xiao! He was too fast. He seemed to have transformed into a bloody flash, so fast that the majority of the cultivators in the consummate level of mountain river tier could not even catch his movement. Pong! They saw Ling Han move. His right hand flicked and delivered a flash of sword chi. This strike was so fast it had reached the peak. Hong! Their attacks clashed, forming a brilliant explosion and causing the majority of people to become blind even when they had their eyes open. They were completely unable to see how the battle had progressed. However, the brightness soon vanished. They saw that Ling Han was still standing proudly in the center of the arena, his right arm leveled out. His forefinger and middle finger had joined together to form a sword. There was a weak sword light flickering around it. Zhang Long, though, had collapsed at Ling Han's feet, his face facing upwards. There was blood gushing out of his chest. What? Someone as strong as Zhang Long had been defeated with a single move. Everyone watched with wide eyes. Even their breathing had stagnated. How could that be possible? This was completely impossible. Some of them even wanted to shout in astonishment as they held their heads. They felt that they must have seen it wrong and understood things wrong. It must have been Zhang Long who had defeated Ling Han with a single move. However, when they closed and opened their eyes again, there was still not the slightest change in the scene. Zhang Long was lying on the ground, completely unconscious. Defeat utter and complete defeat. Ling Han sent Zhang Long back to the rock he had originally been on with a kick. The force he had used in this kick was ingenious. It just sent Zhang Long to lie face down on the rock, his behind facing upwards as his arms hung on either side. That image would definitely remain in everyone's memories forever. Gan Shiyun only felt coldness rise from deep within. Ling Han's strength had completely exceeded her expectations. He had defeated even Zhang Long so easily. Could it be that he had formed his fifth mountain river? That was really a moat to the heavens. Even a super sect the likes of the majestic Heaven sect, which had gathered the most brilliant geniuses from over 100 planets, still merely had 6 king tiers at present. This kind of genius would definitely be treated like a great treasure by the sect. How could she possibly have any hope for vengeance then? Ling Han looked coldly at her. The fact that Zhang Long chose to challenge him alone was obviously not unrelated to Gan Shiyun. Gan Shiyun merely felt as if her soul itself trembled. She hurriedly lowered her gaze, not daring to meet Ling Han's eyes. Ho ho, I really did not imagine that junior brother Han would be so strong, Wu Zhi praised, smiling as he clapped his hands, a strong glint of wariness in his eyes. He did not dare to underestimate even Zhang Long, because it was highly possible that the latter would form the fifth mountain river and once again catch up to him. Then, wasn't this man that had defeated Zhang Long even more frightening? Ling Han broke into a smile and asked, Brother Wu, could you give me some guidance? Chapter 1154, Junior Brother Wu. Chapter 1154, Junior Brother Wu. Though Brother Wu and Senior Brother Wu were different by only one word, the meaning each address represented was completely different. Senior Brother Wu was a kind of respectful address from one who admitted his own abilities were no match for his. As for Brother Wu, that was a polite address from one who absolutely did not think he was weaker than him. It was just like He Tao and Wu Zhi, who would address each other as brother, and neither would address the other as senior brother. As for those who referred to themselves as senior brother, that was because they thought that they were stronger, so how could they possibly lower their own standing? But that was He Tao and Wu Zhi, 2 of the 6 king tiers. Was he, Ling Han, qualified to do the same? Wu Zhi's face involuntarily darkened, and a hint of displeasure appeared on it. Did this brat think that he could challenge him just because he had defeated Zhang Long? He was wary of Zhang Long, but that was not because of his present abilities, but rather his potential. In future, the latter might possibly be on equal grounds with himself. If it was in terms of abilities, he was naturally capable of crushing Zhang Long. Forming the fifth mountain river was a qualitative boost. Meanwhile, He Tao smiled slightly. He was still using divine flames to boil tea, appearing to be very serene. Junior Brother Han, you seem to be a little too arrogant, Wu Zhi said icily. Junior Brother Wu, I think that you had better address me as senior brother. That way, even if you lost, it would be logical, Ling Han countered with a smile. Pooh! The others were gaping with their mouths wide open. They had already known that Ling Han was very arrogant, but had never thought that he would be so direct. All of them were seeds of the majestic Heaven sect, so why did he have to go so far with his actions? If he lost this battle, then would he still be able to stay in the sect? Who would dare befriend him after he became the target of Wu Zhi, one of the 6 king tiers? Would Ling Han be able to win? Besides diehard fans like Hu Feiyun, practically no one would believe that Ling Han would be able to win over Wu Zhi. Even if Ling Han had just beaten Zhang Long, Wu Zhi had defeated Su Jing, Duan, and such extreme geniuses. Furthermore, as one of the 6 king tiers, this glory was enough to fill others with absolute belief in him. In the sect, no one could challenge the position of the 6 king tiers. Nobody understood. Why did Ling Han seem to have a grudge against Wu Zhi to actually oppose him in this manner? They had indeed not guessed wrongly. Ling Han was a man who was too protective of his own. Wu Zhi had previously played a trick on the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han pretend like he had not seen it? He was naturally going to avenge this loss. Junior Brother Han, you are really quite interesting. Wu Zha's whole face was livid. He stretched out his right hand, and Wang. It immediately turned pure gold in color like it was forged from divine metal. There was a vague feeling of transparency to it. The last few times he had fought, he had been very casual, but now, he had already used a powerful move even though the battle had not begun. It was naturally because he was truly angered. Of course, the other reason was that Ling Han was strong enough, as he had defeated Zhang Long with a single move. Even Wu Zha would not dare be careless with power like Ling Han's. Ling Han similarly did not dare underestimate this opponent. The trick he'd played on the Rain Emperor was one matter, but Wu Zha's abilities could not be refuted just on the basis of that. Ling Han's physique was enough to make him invincible, but he did not want to use that kind of method to defeat his opponent. He was trying to get justice for the Rain Emperor, so he naturally had to obtain a satisfying victory. Junior Brother Wu is not the slightest bit interesting, though, not calling me senior brother nicely. What are you being so stubborn for? Ling Han said, smiling. Have you had enough? Wu Zha roared angrily. Wang. This shout turned solid, creating a visible sound wave. They could see a golden ripple roll out in all directions. Pong, 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 pong. At least half of the spectators fell off their rocks. The might of one shout was actually that powerful. Everyone was astonished. Wu Zha probably hadn't shown even 30% of his true abilities so far. Oh no, how was Ling Han going to block it? Ling Han stood proudly, and as the sound wave swept over him, it only caused his robes to flutter and his hair to wave slightly. How could it have possibly hurt him? He calmly said, "It is not decided by who has the louder voice. No matter how loud you shout, junior brother would still be junior brother, and it cannot be changed." You! Wu Zha had almost gone mad in rage. He pounced out. In the end, he could not stop himself from taking the initiative to attack Ling Han. Theoretically, the senior brother would have to make an allowance of 1 or 2 moves in this kind of spar, and this was also why he had not made his move just now when he had obviously been in a thunderous rage. That was because he wanted to conduct himself with dignity as per his status, but now, he had been so angered by Ling Han that he had forgotten all that. He only wanted to trample all over this despicable guy. However, he was truly powerful, incredibly powerful, even. Cultivating the 5th mountain river was the pinnacle level. Innumerable rays of golden light descended from the skies, forming multiple sharp blades that slashed down on Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his right hand and formed a barrier above his head. A frightening amount of origin power boiled, exuding an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Wu Zha's. Pong, 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 pong. The golden blades fell, but not one was able to penetrate Ling Han's barrier of origin power. And at this moment, Wu Zha himself had also already arrived. His punch landed like a great star falling down, causing the heaven and earth themselves to pale in comparison. Ling Han's competitive spirit burned, and he similarly raised a fist to receive the others with an attack of his own. Pong! The 2 fists collided, and instantly, a brilliant, blinding light was created. A shock wave rippled out. Those who had just sat back down were once again sent flying. This time was even worse as they fell off the mountain peak. Thankfully, the mountain peak was not tall. Hence, they merely fell a short distance before reaching the ground. The collision of fists of Wu Zha and Ling Han had not ended. The 2 sides were exerting power, wanting to cause the other to collapse. Zizizi, endless power appeared in the form of light, continuously asterisk, and the deafening noise was like a heavenly tribulation, and also like the heavens collapsing. Pong! Finally, the 2 of them trembled and ended this clash of fists. Wu Zha was bounced back and landed safely with a somersault, whereas Ling Han retreated slightly for 7 steps before regaining his balance. Who got the upper hand? They couldn't really understand what they were seeing. It seemed to have been a draw. Ling Han frowned slightly. He had just broken through to the pinnacle level, after all. In terms of mere power, the other was just that slight bit superior to him, but the gap was not too large. Then, in a situation where the power of both sides was about the same, it would have to depend on who had the stronger secret technique, and whose natural talent in battle was higher. Wu Zhe's expression instantly became incredibly serious, and he said, "No wonder you were so arrogant. So it turns out that junior brother Han has also cultivated to the pinnacle level." What? Everyone felt their hair rise on ends. This aggressive guy had actually also formed the fifth mountain river. No wonder. No wonder he had been able to challenge Wu Zhe. The two of them had already stood on the true peak of mountain river tier. Then, let us battle with our fullest. Wu Zhe shouted loudly, stretching out both arms. They were actually stretching continuously, becoming thinner, and turned into two golden blades. The blades were covered with divine patterns all over, and if one counted, there were as many as 79 of them. He gave a large shout and charged over at Ling Han. His two blade arms were brandished continuously, shooting out terrifying flashes of sword chi. Ling Han did not take it lying down. Using his two fingers like he would a sword, he ran forwards to receive the attack. Ding, 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 ding. They clashed endlessly. They were obviously mere bodies of blood and flesh, yet in their clash, the sounds of metals colliding with one another was heard, causing others to gasp. To what freakish extent had these two people cultivated their physique? But none would be as apprehensive as Wu Zhe. Chapter 1155. Unleashing Trump Cards. Chapter 1155. Unleashing Trump Cards. Wu Zhe was naturally aware that he could only transform his arm into a divine sword because of the cultivate that he practiced. However, he couldn't channel this cultivation technique forever. If he channeled it for too long, his body would be irreparably damaged. Meanwhile, it didn't seem like Ling Han was channeling any cultivation technique at all. It was as if his physique was innately as powerful as godly metal. This is far too terrifying. Do such freaks really exist in the world? He took a deep breath. The might of his opponent was a bit beyond his expectations. He waved his arm sword and roared, "Heavens above and netherworld beneath. Slay all the countless heroes in the world." Boom! Sword light burst from his body, and his aura instantly soared to a new height. "I am the sword." He launched a flurry of attacks at Ling Han, each of his strikes bold and powerful. He wished to defeat Ling Han with his supreme sword intent. Ling Han met Wu Zhe's attacks with his finger. Since his opponent wasn't using a god tool, he wouldn't use his divine demon sword, either. He was going to overwhelm his opponent in every single aspect and leave him with no room for excuses. Suppress him. Ling Han unleashed his divine patterns of gravity to affect his Wu Zhe's movements. They were at the same cultivation level right now, so Wu Zhe couldn't avoid the fate of being affected. The only difference was how much he was affected. He staggered forward before immediately regaining his balance and continuing his attack on Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled and continued to unleash his divine patterns of gravity as he blocked Wu Zhe's attacks with his finger. Although his divine patterns of gravity only had minimal effects, even the smallest of effects were of great significance in a battle between elites. Indeed, Wu Zhe was extremely annoyed by the divine patterns of gravity. Although they had little effect on him, they would cause his attacks to veer slightly off course every single time. This ticked him off immensely. During battle, one's mental state was especially important. However, Wu Zhe's battle prowess was elevated to a new height after he unleashed one of his most powerful techniques, and it seemed as if he were about to turn the tables on and suppress Ling Han. Ling Han's pride was also like a raging fire, and he used his fingers like a sword as he activated his divine patterns of flame. Roaring flames instantly burst to life on his right hand. These weren't ordinary flames, but rather flames that had been formed from the regulations of the Great Tao. These were flames that could incinerate even godly metal. Wu Zhe frowned deeply. Even he felt pressure in front of these divine flame. His opponent looked much younger than him, so how could he engrave so many regulations of the Great Tao in his body? He couldn't lose. Wu Zhe's fighting spirit soared into the sky. He was one of the 6 King's tier prodigies, so how could he lose to others? Being defeated by the other 5 King tiers was not an option, either. After all, if he lost, how could he still maintain an equal status with the other King tiers? "Duo!" he roared in a low voice, and the sound waves of his roar transformed into a sword that slashed toward Ling Han. Ling Han casually swung a fist at this sword. Pa! The Soundwave sword exploded into pieces. However, a sharp pain instantly stabbed at his mind. Huh, spiritual attack? Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Who would have thought that the Soundwave attack was only a facade? The true attack had actually turned out to be a spiritual attack. However, his opponent would never guess that he had already cultivated his divine sense to an extremely powerful level. It had been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so, like his physique, it was one minor level stronger than his current cultivation level. What? A look of shock finally appeared on Wu's face when he saw that his spiritual attack had been ineffective. He had unleashed the perishing shock wave just then, which was an extremely profound spiritual attack technique. In fact, it was one of the majestic Heaven Sect's secret techniques. He had only been taught this technique because he had reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. If one didn't reach the pinnacle level, this technique wouldn't be taught to them, regardless of how prodigious they were. Ling Han had only just entered the sect, so of course he hadn't been taught the perishing shock wave yet. Anyhow, even if he had learned it, it would only elevate the offensive ability of his divine sense, not the defensive ability. Wu had roared to cover up his spiritual attack, and his opponent had taken the full brunt of this attack. However, he had come out of it completely unscathed. This was unbelievable. What kind of freak is he? Ling Han cracked a grin and said, "That was a fairly good surprise attack. I'll give you 9 out of 10. I've deducted 1 point to prevent you from becoming too arrogant." Fuck, do you really think you're my senior brother? Wu's expression became icy, and he finally retrieved a god tool. It was a slightly damaged sword. However, it was radiating an ancient and profound aura. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, he said solemnly. 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, someone shouted in astonishment. That's an inherited precious treasure of the Wu clan. According to rumors, this is a sword that was used by the ancient ancestor of the Wu clan. Both he and his sword perished during his final battle, yet the precious sword absorbed the ancient ancestor's soul. As such, one can comprehend the sword intent of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor if they cultivate with this sword. At that time, the Wu clan's ancient ancestor was a supreme elite at the heavenly body tier. According to legends, he was a freakish talent who could even exchange a few blows with eternal river tier elites. No wonder senior brother Wu's sword intent is so powerful. It's because he received the inheritance of the 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. This wasn't a replica, and it was the genuine 3 clouds, 3 flower sword. You should be proud that you forced me to use the 3 clouds, 3 flower sword, Wu said. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Regardless of what you do, you still won't be able to avoid defeat. It's not a good habit to make such bold claims. Be careful of slapping your own face." Wu leaped forward, slashing with his sword as he did so. Countless clouds and flowers materialized in the air. Ling Han felt as if he had been drawn into another world, one that was brimming with clouds and flowers. However, if he moved even just a little bit, these clouds and flowers would exude a terrifying and wicked killing intent. Every step was thorny, and every step was dangerous. However, Ling Han was unafraid. Even if this genuinely was a high-grade god tool, how powerful it was would still depend on who was wielding it. Although Wu had formed 5 mountains and rivers, it was clear that he still hadn't reached the true pinnacle yet. Thus, it was impossible for him to possess power at the Sun-Moon tiers level. Meanwhile, Ling Han's physique determined that he would definitely have the last laugh. The only question was whether he won easily or won with some difficulty. He moved his right hand and retrieved the divine demon sword. A murderous aura instantly soared into the sky. This was devouring metal, a metal that could evolve into divine metal in the future. Even though its current level was still low, it possessed immense potential. Moreover, it had been tempered by several heavenly tribulations, and thus it was engraved with Ling Han's comprehension of Tao. One was engraved with its wielder's Tao, while the other was a damaged weapon used by someone tens of thousands of years ago. How could their affinity with their owner be the same? A brilliant light instantly burst from the divine demon's sword, appearing tremendously mighty and astounding. The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping immediately sprang up, a look of excitement on their faces. They naturally guessed Ling Han's identity upon seeing him retrieve the divine demon sword. They also understood why he had stepped forward to challenge Wuxia. This was because Wuxia had wounded the Rain Emperor, and his tactics had more so been sly and shady. With Ling Han's personality of protecting his own people, how could he let such a matter slide? Their swords clanged together, and their martial intent collided violently. Strands of divine patterns materialized in the air and transformed into chains of regulations that fluttered in the sky. If the Three Clouds, Three Flower Sword were in its original condition, Ling Han's divine demon sword would have been no match for it. After all, it was still just a seedling that was far from fulfilling its potential of becoming divine metal. However, the Three Clouds, Three Flower Sword was damaged, and it would have been a block of useless metal had it not fused together with the soul of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor. Now, however, it was evenly matched with the divine demon sword. Chapter 1156, Suppressed in All Aspects. Chapter 1156, Suppressed in All Aspects. Ling Han nodded in his mind. The inherent high quality of the divine demon sword was finally displaying its might. It was a god tool that had the potential to become divine metal, after all, so how could it not be powerful? Ling Han didn't need to control his sword at all, as it was already fully engraved with his martial intent. He could manipulate it with just a thought, and doing so would be no different from wielding it with his hands. This was a terrifying notion. This sword was equivalent to a separate body of Ling Han, so when it teamed up with him, just how overwhelming would his battle prowess become? Wuxia instantly regretted summoning his god tool. Neither of them had summoned their god tool just then, and he hadn't been at a disadvantage either. It was just that he didn't have an opportunity to attain victory yet. However, it was because of his strong desire to achieve victory that he summoned his Three Clouds, Three Flower Sword. He wanted to end the battle as soon as possible, and thus reaffirm his dignity as a senior brother. However, who would have imagined that his opponent's god tool would be just as powerful as his? Moreover, it had an incredible affinity with Ling Han. It was as if it had been nurtured by him. This made him feel very miserable. This was really a case of going out for wool, and coming back shorn had screwed himself over. Ling Han's heart and spirit were both linked to the divine demon sword, and thus the divine demon sword was able to channel his sword Dao as it slashed toward Wuxia. Meanwhile, Ling Han also swung his fists at Wuxia. This was the second path that he wanted to take. The sword Dao was his first choice. In any case, it would be a waste not to take the path of the sword Dao since he already owned a god tool like the divine demon sword. However, he also wanted to take the path of the unarmed combat Dao. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and his physique was so powerful that he could be viewed as a human weapon. He possessed the Nine Dragons' tyrant body art on top of that, and this technique allowed him to wield an endless power. Thus, he was extremely suited to close combat. His fists, legs, elbows, and even head could all be used as deadly weapons. Boundless divine light radiated from the divine demon sword, and Ling Han's fists were also raging with divine flames as they rained down on his opponent. Similar to the Rain Emperor, he was exuding an incredibly mighty and domineering aura. He would crush whoever stood in his way. Wuxia was unwilling to yield. He felt that Ling Han was far too overconfident. Generally speaking, people would only attack in such a manner if their power was far greater than that of their opponent. If one swung their fists wildly as Ling Han did, they would suffer greatly if they came across an opponent who was slightly more powerful. Wuxia roared in anger as he used his sword to parry the divine demon sword. At the same time, his left hand also balled into a fist, and he punched at Ling Han. As one of the 6 king tiers, he wasn't afraid of anyone at the same cultivation level. Pung, pung, pung. The two of them continued to exchange blows. In terms of power, neither of them had an advantage over the other. Although Wu Zhe was slightly more powerful, it was only by a very insignificant margin. Thus, this could still be viewed as an evenly matched battle. Their fists rained down on each other at incredible speed, and they had already exchanged 100 or so blows in just a few seconds. In the end, they separated from each other and concluded their brief moment of unarmed combat. Ling Han was naturally unscathed. However, blood was dripping from Wu Zhe's wounded left hand. In fact, his entire left arm was trembling in exertion. Even origin power shields wouldn't be of much use during such close-quarters combat. This was also why many cultivators avoided close-quarters combat whenever possible. Unarmed combat would reduce the effectiveness of origin power, though origin power was what most people cultivated. Very few people practiced body arts. In terms of physique, it was clear that Ling Han had achieved a resounding victory. Wu Zhe grimaced in disbelief. His opponent's divine sense was already frighteningly stable. Yet, right now, he realized that his opponent's physique was also on a freakish level. How can someone be so freakish? The spectators were all stunned. Wu Zhe had unleashed his full battle prowess, yet he had still been wounded. Who could have predicted this? Meanwhile, Gan Shiyun's slender body trembled in shock. She finally realized just how wrong she had been. She had provoked and offended an absolute freak. If Ling Han didn't die, his achievements would definitely surpass the ancients and amaze the contemporaries. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Junior brother Wu, are you still not going to admit defeat?" Wu Zhe's expression was livid, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Wasn't this utterly humiliating? He was one of the 6 kings, so who didn't give him some face? However, this person who had just entered the sect was acting aggressive and overbearing. Was this really a smart choice? Han Lin, you've gone too far, Wu Zhe said through gritted teeth. Although he still had some trump cards, his mind went numb whenever he thought about his opponent's incredible physique. Could his trump cards really contain his opponent? In any case, this was only a sparring match, and some of his trump cards were consumable as they would be gone once he used them. Thus, he wasn't willing to use them either. That being the case, he hoped that Ling Han would relent after a while and not take things too far. "Call me senior brother, and I'll naturally go easier on you," Ling Han said calmly. Wu Zhe had used shady tactics against the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han let him off the hook easily? There was a dark look in Wu Zhe's eyes, and his fists were also clenched tightly. He would never admit defeat. "You really think you can win?" He channeled a forbidden technique, and a strange pattern appeared on his forehead. It radiated with a dim and eerie glow. "What's that?" The spectators were all astonished and frightened. They had merely glanced at the pattern, yet it felt as if their minds had been slashed by a sword. This made them feel extremely uncomfortable. That's the extreme nightmare technique," someone shouted in astonishment. "Heavens! Senior brother Wu actually mastered that ancient technique." Everyone hurriedly asked the person what this technique was. Only then did he reveal that this was one of the most profound cultivation techniques of the majestic Heaven sect. However, it was incredibly difficult to cultivate, and there was no record of anyone being able to successfully master it. To their surprise, however, Wu Zhe was actually using this technique. Wu Zhe's aura changed noticeably, and a dark air rose from his body. It was as if he had transformed into Night Gaunt, one that would bring boundless nightmares to its victims. Ling Han was completely unfazed. Both his physique and his divine sense had broken through the limit of the mountain river tier. So what did he need to worry about? He stood in an undefeatable position, and the only unknown was the method by which he would achieve victory. Let's see what he's got. He was extremely interested in this cultivation technique as it caused a hint of fear to grip at his heart. "You'll regret this," Wu Zhe said coldly. He made a punching motion toward Ling Han, and countless streaks of dark light surged from his fist. He had suffered once already, so he didn't dare engage in unarmed combat with Ling Han again. Instead, he reverted to Cultivator's traditional tactics. He increased his distance from the opponent to battle using martial arts techniques. Ling Han swung his fists in defense. Pu, pu, pu. The streaks of dark light struck his fist, and they surprisingly left several patches of blood marks. So powerful. Ling Han was astonished. One had to realize that the toughness of his physique was already on par with level 5 godly metal. In other words, it was equivalent to the full power defense of a cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Even so, Wu's attack had still left several blood marks on his fists. This was proof of just how terrifying the streaks of dark light were. Meanwhile, Wu almost fainted in shock. In reality, his cultivation level was too low for him to channel the extreme nightmare technique. He was indeed able to channel it now, yet this came at the price of him not being able to use origin power for an entire 3 months after this. He had paid such a heavy price, so the streaks of dark light that he had unleashed were naturally terrifying to the extreme. However, they merely left a few blood marks on Ling Han's fists. How could he accept this? He wanted to vomit a large mouthful of blood. It's fairly powerful, but it's still not enough. Ling Han laughed loudly as he manipulated his divine demon sword and launched a flurry of attacks that completely suppressed Wu. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.